1, 2, 1, 2.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Smack Panda podcast. And today we're blessed with our guest, Dr. Stephen Hill. I took some notes and I was trying to write a nice introduction for Stephen, but I'd need about 3 or 4 pages to do it. So, professor at Wollongong Uni, an author, a polymath. Worked for the United Nations for many years, set up so many programs. I suppose one of the most interesting things is he's a man that survived death, which is official death as well.
It was.
Not the pretend death. Can you tell us about that?
I was dead last year between September and November. And it wasn't just my fantasy, it was officially the United Nations decision that I was dead, okay? Now, I used to work in the United Nations, as you said, and as a result of that, I worked there long enough to get a pension. And I noticed in September that they hadn't paid it for 2 months. And I thought, no, this is not a good thing. So I started chasing this down. And I found a basic rule of the United Nations was they never pay a pension to dead people, okay? And they had declared me dead. Which I found quite disturbing, and I didn't feel dead, and I looked in the mirror and I didn't look dead.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was reincarnated or anything. If I was as bad as I was when I started. But anyway, it turned out what had happened was that every year for people who getting the United Nations pension, they send a letter by mail, and you sign it and send it back by mail, and that convinces them that you are alive.
Yeah.
Okay. I moved from an apartment not long before, and I told them the new address, but they didn't have that down. And so they sent it to my previous address. And the man who took over this apartment after me did die in the apartment.
Oh, no.
And the people after it got the letter, and of course, being very helpful, as they were to the United Nations, they immediately wrote back, oh, he's dead, forget it, he's dead, he's gone, And they believed it, okay? The next thing I get a letter then from the United Nations, which is not to me, but to the estate of Stephen Hill.
So they eventually got your address right, though, somehow.
They had the address right, but they didn't quite get it the first time.
Yeah.
And this letter from the deputy head of the payroll office in New York of the United Nations, whose name appropriately was Mr. Affable, that I thought was entirely appropriate. A very friendly sort of guy.
Yeah.
But it was written to the estate of Stephen Hill, not to me, and it was very consoling to the family and saying, so sorry that Mr. Hill is now dead. Please send us his death certificate so we can fix this up. Anyway, so I didn't send the death certificate. I didn't need to do that. I finally persuaded them that I was alive. And they then, after 2 months, they started paying me my pension back again. But then I got a letter from them which said, and I think this is something a bit in line with something to put on one's tombstone. I told them I was sick by,
the old Spike Milligan.
Spike Milligan.
Yeah.
And what they wrote in this letter was, Dear Mr. Hill, we now realise that you are alive. Sorry for the inconvenience. So this is definitely going on my tombstone. But working in the United Nations, I sort of confronted things that were a little bit close to death every so often, because it could be quite exciting in times.
Yeah,
my own staff had problems and things too, because we're in some interesting places. Particularly for me, I was looking after work in the Mindanao, which is the southern Philippines province.
Yeah,
and in 1996, the agreement to stop the conflict was signed. And
there was a civil war going on? Was it a communist thing there?
No, it was Islamic. It was Islamic war, or Islamic conflict and so on. But Mindanao was way beyond anywhere else in the Philippines in terms of lack of literacy and education and wealth. Okay,
yeah.
So we moved in on that, and one of the programs, we trained 7,000 village people to be literate. Okay, 7,000.
Wow. Yep.
It cost me $100 a person in 1 year to make them literate. Okay, and one of these women, because the UN asked me about this, actually went and talked about it at the United Nations General Assembly as a talk. And she said, look, now I don't get lost. I can talk to my kids about school. They don't get cheated in in my shop,
Yeah.
because I can read what's happening. So this is freedom for me, what it represented. And the second thing we then started to do was we built about 9 radio stations, but that required bringing together the community across the Christian Islamic lines as well, so that they would support what we're doing. Partly for literacy, but also some pretty young punk kids got in there. And I've got a fabulous recording of these kids doing a real sort of fantastic broadcast. Meanwhile, the tanks are rolling past outside.
Wow, real
and
deal.
the rebels are in the hill.
Yep.
Anyway, the terrorist group Abu Sayyaf took offence at this, and they decided that they would assassinate me.
Jeez.
And they sent down a squad to take me out. I was living in Jakarta at the time.
Oh, you're kidding.
And they got through, they came down through Manado, and they were in Sulawesi coming across to Java, where I lived. At which stage the security guys in the UN found out about this and alerted me and said, get the hell out of Indonesia, which I did, as one does when you're being chased by an assassination squad. It's not something you do easily.
Yeah.
And that then became another story, because I was going to an island, an office, which was one that I looked after as well, to some extent, in Samoa.
Yeah.
And on the way down, we stopped in Auckland, in Pacific Air, and Pacific Air offloaded my entire luggage and replaced it with 300 Bibles. So I arrived in Samoa with only
a very religious man.
A very spiritual presence,
Yes.
but only
they would have loved you there.
only a pair of shorts for ceremonial occasions. Okay.
That would have been a heavy bag.
Well, it was, but I didn't have to lift it because I got there and I found 300 Bibles.
That's strange, isn't it? So,
well, it was great for me in terms of the local churches. They thought this was really kind
awesome.
of very helpful.
It might have been the Gideons. Those guys get around.
I don't think they were Gideon Bibles, but I didn't take a lot of attention, actually. It wasn't really my priority. And, of course, the next weekend I went for at least a bit of a leave out to the most remote resort I could find. I got hit by a cyclone, with the trees literally flying past.
Wow.
The waves go out through the bottom. So at that stage I was almost praying to go back to the bloody terrorists, Anyway, so that was part of life in the UN. And one other story about, on a similar vein, given that I'm now 78, so it's close to all this stuff, was when I first started, because I first was a research chemist before I did other things.
Okay.
I went on, and after that, I'll come back to that in a minute. The point is that I was working in the Unilever laboratories in Balmain, okay, and one day I smelt almonds, okay.
Yeah.
Now, almonds is not a good smell, because that's hydrogen cyanide.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And you've probably got a minute to live if you smell it. That's possible. Anyway, so I didn't put anybody in, but I did get... What had happened was that one very foolish young woman in the laboratory had been using sodium cyanide and threw it down the sink just to get rid of it.
Oh, my word.
And the next guy came along a couple of minutes later and tossed her with some sulfuric acid. Poof, off she went. We had... The whole laboratory was full of cyanide poisoning, okay?
Yeah.
So I told the chief chemist, and he immediately appointed me to develop a system of safety for the laboratory, which they applied, I think, on the other labs of Unilever around the place.
Yep.
But the only way that you can actually handle cyanide is really fast. And so what I did was to put, everybody had an ampule attached to the laboratory coat to their collar, okay?
Yep.
Then they could crush it if they smelt cyanide and breathe it in, okay? Now, I didn't know what you used.
Was that amyl nitrate?
Amyl nitrite.
Yes.
Nitrite, yes.
Nitrite, yes, I remember that. That was a bit of a party drug back in the 90s or something.
Well, that was what I found later. I didn't realise at the time I'd equipped the whole of Unilever Research Laboratory with pill poppers.
That was called poppers, wasn't it?
All they had to do was to sort of say, almonds crushed, hey, and off with pixies they went, I don't actually know whether anyone ever did that,
but people probably would have.
They probably did.
But how did you get? So you're doing chemistry and then switching. I don't know how you got to the UN from there. So chemistry is a science. How did you go from a physical science to dealing with people? I suppose
there's to me a real lesson about having a mentor, somebody who really helps a lot. Okay.
Yep.
And my supervisor in chemistry was a mentor, seriously a mentor. And he wanted to find out, this was back in 1964, it's a long time back.
Yeah.
And nobody had ever done anything about finding out what was really going on in science in Australia. They didn't know how much research was being done, who was doing it, what was going on.
Yep.
We didn't know how many what had happened to PhD people, for example, that had come back from overseas or whatever. So he asked me to do this as a side project while I was doing my honours degree.
Yep.
And which I did, and we travelled around, did all sorts of things.
You tracked these people down?
No, we surveyed them, but I went around a lot of laboratories to see what was going on.
Yeah.
And the result, but Ian said, Steve, if you're going to do this, you need to learn economics, okay?
Oh,
and he enrolled me in a number of courses in the economics. He gave me Ted Wheelwright, who was the only left-wing economist in the country at that time, as my mentor for the year, and I learned sort of economics. And at the end of that time, I said to him, look, what else is there I could do? He said, well, there's this new degree program called an MBA in Melbourne in the business school. Just started this year, okay?
Okay.
So I went down, I did the MBA, okay, and I passed. Well, I was qualified for it, but then I converted it to do a PhD.
Masters of Business Administration?
MBA, Master of Business Administration.
Yep.
And I went on to do the PhD. In fact, it was the first PhD in business in Australia.
Is that right?
But my supervisor was from what's called the Tavistock Institute in London.
Yep.
And he was a social anthropologist. So what I did was work with the people in the laboratories, okay, not study them with questionnaires from outside.
Okay, yeah.
And that did two things for me. Number one, I started then to, because no one had done it before, and so I was sort of first around. And the first science policy conference of the world was held by UNESCO in Sydney in 1965, and they brought me in to be the assistant director of this, okay?
Okay.
So then I started to get in contact with developing countries as well.
Yeah.
And that sort of led to many other things as well from there. So in a sense, this mentoring tossed me onto a path, and I then went off and with a Fulbright and a few other bits and pieces to the United States, worked in Chicago and then Sussex University. Yep. And finally got back to Australia and then became a professor of sociology when I was 30 years old.
So you got that's quite young. So you were travelling, when did you get your MBA? You were about 24?
65. So I would have been, 22.
22.
23, yeah. That's
yeah.
23.
Wow. And you were busy from over that time.
Yeah, well, one of the really interesting things on this was that, again, it's people. So often make these connections that then take you places you don't really expect to go.
Yeah, fantastic.
And the man who employed me in this science policy conference was a man called Guy Grieford, who was actually the head of CSIRO's Secretariat at that time. But he moved on to be head of the United Nations area in New York, working on science and stuff. Yep. And the opportunity came up there was a world conference, the first one, on developing a world plan for science and technology for the 1970s decade, 10 years. Yep. And Guy Grieford got me involved in this, and we worked in Sussex University at the back in an old mansion house for 3 weeks. Quietly with these very, very high, really terrific economists and so on. Yep. And we knew what we were doing because we'd started looking at things. And the real issue at that time, people had this fantasy from the 1960s that what people did in research and technology and industry in the developed world, it would naturally flow to the poor in developing countries and enrich them.
Trickle-down science.
Which, to put it fairly mildly, was total bullshit.
Yeah.
And I actually did research, I'll come back to that later, in India to show that. But the thing is that we produced our report and gave it to the United Nations Secretariat, and they said, no, this is too radical. We refuse to publish this. We'd all been contracted, consultants each, by the UN. And we got a little upset about this, and my other guys were a lot more senior than me. We finally prevailed upon the United Nations Secretariat, and they said, okay, and they did their own report, which is all about this optimistic kind of stuff. That's what really matters. Didn't believe us, despite the fact we were the experts. Yeah. And they buried our report as far as they could in the appendix. Okay. Yeah. And but what happened when it got to the conference was that the people actually read their reports, and they said, this is much better than that report. Yeah. And they adopted it universally across the whole conference, and they called it the Sussex Manifesto. Okay. Yeah. And what it meant, and this is why it was so important for us, if the plan had gone ahead for that decade and it had all been about this absolutely wrong view about what happens with technology for development for people who are poor, that would have stained the whole of development for that period. Yeah. After that, the UN then employed me to write the plans for Asia for the next 20 years. Then I got the job doing it, So it's sort of people, mentors, opportunities, being at the right time, and things sort of float along from there. But if I just go back for one bit, just back to where I was before,
for sure.
The Unilever safety shirt, it was probably my first gift that came out of my work.
Yeah.
And I got lots of gifts in the course of what I did, particularly in when I was in the United Nations. So, for example, in particular, I was 6 months into the job, and 2 of my staff were taken hostage into the jungles of West Papua, by the freedom fighters of West Papua, the OPM. And the girl had been, the young woman, I should say, she had been in Komodo on a mission. Just when I arrived, I just sent her out to Komodo, and the boat she was on capsized, and 5 people drowned, and she escaped by swimming to an island.
Wow!
And we escaped, and so when she came back from that, and I said, Marta, look, you need a bit of time out. You're the environment person. We're doing a lot of things up in the highlands of West Papua to make it into a World Heritage Site, which we did.
Oh, excellent!
Lawrence National Park. And so I said, look, why don't you just take a busman's holiday, as it were, take a walk up there. You love walking in the bush and so on. And she just found out she was pregnant as well. So she and her partner had to work out what they're going to do with their relationship. 8 days through the bush,
That was sorted out.
That was sorted out, yeah.
For sure.
So meanwhile, other things were going on behind the scenes. And they got to the village of Mapundua, up in the top of the highlands. And there was some young kids, basically, from Cambridge University who were there, the leader of whom had a terribly, terribly lovely, posh English accent,
Yes.
And they flew in 2 plane loads of things to support them when they were there, and they broke every rule in the book, even though we told them in advance, and so did WWF. Careful up there, number 1, do not take Javanese people with you because of the military attacks they associate Javanese with the military murders that were going on. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
They will be in danger. And secondly, make sure you follow the culture of the people. But they'd walk across the land without asking. They would take things, take them back to Cambridge to show them off without asking and so on. So they became a target. And unfortunately, my guys arrived the day before the OPM decided to attack, to
these
take these
Cambridge
kids.
Yeah.
In fact, they even apologised to Marta and said, sorry, whatever, but we're going to have to do it. And they were shooting. It was pretty nasty. Anyway, so they got captured, and there's quite a long story about what happened. We finally got them out. But one important thing, and again, this is about the importance of understanding culture and moving across cultures, and this is particularly my sociology background helped. It was that when it was very hard to keep contact with the rebels a lot. We had a program whereby every 4 o'clock or so every day we had what we called a scheduled broadcast.
Okay.
They had a radio which had come from one of the priests who was there, and excuse me. So we would have a program of talking to them every day, and so it just suddenly stopped.
Is this on you mean a walkie-talkie or on a radio?
Walkie-talkie.
Walkie-talkie, yeah.
And it just stopped, and we didn't know why, and we thought, they're playing hardball. That's tough, So that's what we assumed for a month.
Yeah.
But what actually happened was that the priest had come along and told the radio operator that the military was going to attack, and he pissed off in the jungle with the radio in the opposite direction to the rebels. They didn't have a radio. Anyway, we finally established contact again, and because I was an ambassador, I could not negotiate at a local level on things because that's an internal political issue. Okay. So we brought in the International Red Cross, and they were marvellous. They did a brilliant job, and a guy called Famayor came in, and he was the guy on the front end of the negotiation.
Okay,
and he was taken from his helicopter, 300 metres up, sat on the edge of a cliff, which is about 100 metres high, surrounded by 200 rebel soldiers in penis sheaths and spears and bows and arrows, and they're pretty fierce, I can assure you.
I'm sure.
And the leader, number 3 in the hierarchy, sat opposite him, staring at him for 2 minutes, and then said, "What do you want me to wear, T-shirt or penis sheath?" This is how we start the negotiations, okay?
Yeah.
And Ferenc was wise enough to understand what that meant. He said, that's entirely your choice, whether you live in the modern world or the traditional world. I have
It
nothing
was
to
a
do with
deeper
it.
question than.
Of course it was. It was,
Yeah,
it was about something else.
Yeah.
But I've got T-shirts if you're cold, which
Yeah,
is the other thing of the gift. Okay, and
gift.
everything followed from there through. We finally, after a lot of problems, and I won't go into this long story now because I'm talking about the gifts. Okay.
Yeah.
Point is, we got out. 2 of the Javanese were actually murdered at the very end game. And
How long was this? So these
5 months.
5 months.
Yeah.
So
And meanwhile, Marta's pregnant.
she was brand new pregnant. You
Yes.
sent her on holiday.
Yeah.
Nice walk, and she comes back 5 months later.
Yeah, yeah. But meanwhile, they had a plan for the baby. The baby was going to be born in the jungle. Okay, and the baby was going to call Papuani after the province,
Yeah.
and would be carried into battle in front of the traditional men to protect them from bullets. Okay, we didn't think that was a good idea at all.
Was it was a god baby? Like it was a spiritual thing, or a human shield?
No, it was a god baby.
It was a god baby?
Yeah. That's the way they saw it. Okay.
Wow.
We didn't think that was a good idea. Anyway, we got Marta out. It was pretty tough. We finally got her out and so on. That all happened. The
Yeah.
point is that then General Prabowo, who's been trying for years and years to try and be president of Indonesia and never quite got there, thank God.
Yeah.
When he worked with us, he was actually good. I mean, he was Western trained and he understood we had to negotiate, not just attack.
Okay. Yeah.
But afterwards, he was free, and he just set up this pogrom.
He was a general there, was he?
He wasn't a general at that time. He became one.
Okay.
I think he was. Anyway, he was more junior. But the thing is that he then attacked the village up in the highlands, and quite a number of people were killed. We never could find out exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But then settled down a bit. But what had really happened in the meantime was that all the pigs of the people in the highlands had been killed. Either by people wanting to eat, including the military, who just ate whatever the hell they liked,
Yep.
or the people trying to escape into the jungle who'd kill the pigs and take the meat with them so they'd have something to survive with. And the pigs in that society are really important socially because, for example, a man, and it's a man, gets status because of the number of pigs that he has, not because he has them, but because he gives them at ceremonies.
Is that right? Okay.
So the big man gives a lot of pigs at ceremonies, and everyone values him enormously for all of this. Okay, they then eat them and whatever. And so all the pigs have been killed. So I said, I'll replace the pigs of Mapunduma. And I flew 108 pigs by helicopter up into the highlands. Okay, this is not easy.
No. What size are these pigs?
About this size. They're quite
Okay.
small.
Yeah.
Small, but
They got a bit of weight. to them.
packaging pigs is not easy
That's
for an
not-
aircraft.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, we got them in. We had to fly in. They had to fly. I didn't actually take the flight, but we had to get them in very early before the mist came down. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, when I do go up there in the plane, for example, the airstrip was like a slope about this size, and so the plane would land uphill and just stop at the end and put the brake on. But to take off, it just went like bat out of hell down the mountain, and then just dropped until it picked up an air current.
Oh my god.
It wasn't a secure way to get around. But anyway, so I gave the pigs to the people, okay, and they got very pleased about that. But they said, the elders talked to me, and they said, look, we don't know what the world's like outside this jungle. We've never been outside ever before, okay?
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'll bring you up to Jakarta and you can see the world, okay? And in 2 lots I brought tribal chiefs for the very first time out of the jungle into the modern world, okay?
Wow.
And port by port as they came up, because I sent my culture guy down there to look after them, it became a big media role internationally, okay?
Yep.
And by the time they got to the Jakarta, it was a big deal, tribal chiefs come to the modern world for the first time. Story.
Yeah.
President Suharto contacted me and said he wanted to meet them also. I had to introduce them to the president as well.
Yeah.
And that became interesting as well because they had never been out of the jungle before, okay? And, for example, one of the ministers of the president said, I would like to take these people to lunch at one of the restaurants I own, okay? Now, these guys had never been to a city before. They had never been to a restaurant before. They had never been to a Japanese restaurant before.
Oh,
And in particular, they had never been to a teppanyaki Japanese restaurant where they throw
That's
things
right.
at each other. And I have this terrible image that I created this new system in West Papua where people take the stone axes and they throw at each other and catch them to make their meals. I'm not sure that happened. Anyway, the other thing which happened was that I said to these guys, I mean, through a translator, I couldn't speak their dialect, of course. I said, look, this has become such a really interesting thing. I'd like to put on an international press conference. Okay, and they said, fine. We are used to speaking. We do oration at part of our ceremonies and whatever, you know. Not a problem, but we want to dress formally. I have my suit and tie on, no problem. Okay.
Yep.
And then I put on this international press conference with CNN and all the big TV crews coming in and the lot in the UN building. And these guys arrived and they're totally naked except for penis sheaths. This was formal.
That's formal.
It's the only international press conference I ever ran with a bunch of naked men. You know, I could actually literally see through the nose of the guy next to me because he'd forgotten his bone. It goes in there.
That's brilliant.
Anyway, this is all fine. And the next time I went down to West Papua, okay, they said, we're going to put on a ceremony for you. This is, I get back to the gift. This is my point. Okay. And so up in the Highlands, they put on this tribute ceremony for me, okay, especially. And of course, the plane being in Indonesia was 5 hours late. And by the time I got up into the Highlands, what that meant was that the pigs, they had to disinter the pigs to get them out of the ground.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which meant they were fly blown and rancid by the time I got them. But being the honoured guest, no one would eat till me, okay?
Yeah.
And they gave me the best parts. The best part were the jaw and the heart, okay?
Yep.
Rancid flesh of inside of a pig.
Of a pig.
And this is where you learn one key thing about working in a diplomatic world in such situations. Always carry a Swiss penknife. Okay?
Ah, okay.
Because I could slice off the tiniest slivers. That's so beautiful. I must pass it to you. I cannot keep this anymore. And pass it on. Okay. Anyway, so then they produced the gift, which is the whole point of this, giving about this story.
Yeah.
And the gift consisted of a complete armload of spears, bows and arrows and about 8 penis sheaths for different occasions, okay?
Is that one of them?
Yes, that's one of them right there.
Fantastic.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I was going to bring one on today, but it was too long to fit in the bag.
What are they made of?
Eh?
What are they made
No,
of?
it's a yam or some kind of...
Oh, it's a vegetable.
It's a vegetable, yeah. I could say that it was too big to fit in the bag, but it's not related to me. You know? Anyway, the point is that all this thing, and then a statue, because I'd also created 2 art or culture centres there, because a lot of the traditional arts were disappearing, even making stone axes the way they used to, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
We brought in the best guys we could find. And what they produced, we badged them with a United Nations logo to say it's authentic, and then got them sold, so they got money back as well.
Oh, excellent!
Got stuff. Okay. Anyway, the guy who was the main sculptor also gave me this beautiful statue about this size. You know, I've got it at home now.
Yep.
And it's literally a log carved entirely internally, so that without anything being connected, there's a group of men climbing up a tree.
Wow, fantastic.
And one of them actually has a penis sheath on, which you can take off and put back.
Wow. That's
So
a lot of work.
they gave me these. It's amazing. But he did this in days, literally. They're just extraordinary what they could do. But the point is, I got, fortunately, someone to take the statue back. I couldn't. But I had to carry all the spears, okay?
Yeah.
And I got down to Jaipur, the capital, then I get on a commercial flight back to Jakarta, okay, with an armload of spears this big, and bows and arrows, and I finally got through to airport security on the way in to get the plane.
Yep.
And the guy looked at me and said, "Oh, that's too hard. Just take it on board." So I took on enough armours to take over the airport, and got them back. So that was the other gift I was going to say, apart from my shirt, okay, from BHP, from Unilever. Lots else too.
I was just wondering, just jumping back in that, when they went to Jakarta, these tribesmen, how were they? What was the mood in Jakarta? Like, what do Indonesian people think of the West Papuans? Do they consider them Indonesians, or is it separate?
It's changed since then, but they're pretty remote from anything which is really seriously Indonesian. And this was just like something which is really an interesting story type thing,
Yep.
rather than accepting people back into the mainstream of Indonesia. And I think it's probably still pretty
Still
much
a bit
the same.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, the dominant culture in Indonesia is the Javanese, and the dominant, numbers of people as well.
Yeah.
But the language, Bahasa Indonesia, actually is there because it was the language of the traders, and so it's the most widely spread language, not the most concentrated one. But so they chose, which is very sensible. They chose that rather than Javanese. It's a very simple language, so it's
Okay,
It's
that's what the Papuans use, is it? Do they speak that at all? or-
They speak it. Yes, they speak that too, but not if they're in the jungle. They teach
fair
their own. I mean, I don't know the exact number in West Papua, but I know that Papua New Guinea has 900 languages. Okay.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, I was talking to a friend. Is that because they have so many valleys, and so to go talk to your neighbours, you got to climb over a mountain and that. So you tend not to do it.
And it's probably been there for 100 years like that too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
of course, the language has developed over
900
that time.
languages. That's incredible.
Yeah, but so I don't know the exact number in West Papua, but it's very similar. So it's, I think, maybe 300 languages or something like that in West Papua.
Yeah.
So the only common language is actually Indonesian, and which they speak. Just finally, just to say one more thing about awards.
Yep.
One of the programs I was running in Mindanao in the Philippines was on, it's sort of an island, but not quite, called Palawan, on the west coast of Mindanao. And it was an area that was close to a World Heritage site, a cave site, which I was responsible for World Heritage on the region too, and which we were looking after. And but we'd help the village people to develop small industries around it to attract tourists. For example, they all learned to scuba dive, and they show people how not scuba dive, to just swim and
snorkel.
Snorkel. We built a sort of a ecology path for them. We did fish farming and a variety of other things, which started to get the people some money. And the key thing was the tourists started to come, but we're able to convince the government that the tourists did not go further than the outskirts of this village. Until it was at that point that the village people took over, and so they got all the income, not these tourist companies that were coming from outside. But why I mentioned this, the prize or the present, is that I recognised the power of a rock. Because one of the villages had this very large rock just on the edge of the village. Now, why it was important was that the whole of the karst landscape had eroded over 1,000 years or whatever, except for this rock. And inside the rock there were caves and passages and stalagmites and stalactites.
It's a big rock.
Oh, it was a big rock. And on top of it was a completely unique flora, because it had been isolated for 1,000 years. And so what I did, or what we did, was to train them in how to handle people who were spelunking. We gave them the equipment to do this, trained them in geology so they could talk about it. And this rock became the source of income for the whole village.
That fantastic.
It's sort of seeing through just a slightly different eye, because they've had this rock for hundreds of years, thousands of years. Got the bloody rock out the back, it's a nuisance. But to see it a little differently, and suddenly it's a
treasure.
Anyway, one consequence of that is that Mayor Hagedorn, the mayor of the whole area, gave me the annual Mayor's Award as a result of this. So that was my third gift.
That's fantastic. Did it come with a prize?
A prize?
Yes, the Mayor's Award. Did you get a piece of the rock?
Oh, no, the prize. Oh, no, it came with the prize, a big plaque, all sorts of things. Oh, no, this is an official prize. I've actually got it at home and one somewhere.
Fantastic. So I was just thinking about Java. Have you had anything to do working at Wollongong Uni with Java Man? Was that a...
Not personally, it was way back.
Was it? Or there's the Hobbit, the guy from Wollongong?
Oh, yes, that's right. No, I didn't have anything to do with that.
Okay, yeah.
No, that was fascinating stuff.
It's amazing. I think there's a lot of megalithic structures in Indonesia, pyramids and things like this that haven't been fully uncovered yet as well. There seems to be a lot of stuff going on.
Let me tell you one story, if I may. It's about the island
absolutely.
of Siberut, okay? Now, if you look at the map of Indonesia, above Java you will find the island of Sumatra, okay?
Yep.
West of Sumatra, there's a channel, the Sunda Trench, I think it's called. On the other side of that, there's a chain of islands, the Mentawai chain of islands, okay?
Okay.
Now, they are remote. Okay, to get there, you've got to somehow fly into Padang, which is Indonesian airline, which is always interesting. Catch a ferry, which is a very, very, challenging ferry across the Sunda Trench, which is, waving like this all the time.
Yep.
And then I had my official dugout canoe, the other end of this. Okay,
Wow.
This is, I felt, my most appropriate official United Nations vehicle was a dugout canoe. Okay.
Yeah.
And I seriously thought of putting a United Nations flag on the front of it so we could fly it and we rove up and down the rivers and so on. I didn't do that, but still. But still had to travel for it. And this was with an engine on the back, still had to travel a couple of hours to get up the river. Then you had to walk in to get to this village, okay?
Wow.
Very remote.
Okay, yeah.
But it was the last island that had yet not been exploited by illegal traders and people coming in to destroy the forests, okay?
Yep.
And it had the largest number of primate species in the world in their forests.
Wow.
It was a very important forest, okay?
Yep.
So we basically put up we set up a program there to stop this infiltration coming up the trenches, okay?
How'd you do that?
I
was going to say, because that would be...
I got it. There's a German guy called Kuhn, who's just absolutely brilliant. He finally learned all the dialects and he looked after the people. He was accepted as an elder eventually as well.
Yep.
But the first thing I did, there's several things. The illegal traders would come in thinking, no one's going to watch us here, so we changed that. And I sent up, because I used to get quite a number of young interns from Europe, for example, who wanted to go and explore this Ada cultural places. So I'd send a couple of them up to Siberut Island, and but dressed in United Nations things with UN on the back. So as soon as these guys walked out of the jungle, these United Nations people would say, "What are you here for?"
Yeah.
Then the next thing we did was to say, "Well, look, it would be really good if you could maybe all get together rather than be taken separately while you do these negotiations. So why don't we build a hut together, a big hut, okay?" Which we did. And that's where the negotiations. That was my school, okay?
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
But then there was a problem because girls were not supposed to be educated beyond the age of 8, okay? So I sent in female interns to work in the kitchens. Here was a pot, P-O-T, pot. So they used the kitchen as a way of training them, okay? But the key thing, which I was going to say, is this. We thought the people... they'd been there for 1,500 years or something. I mean, it's very, very long time that they'd been there. And their views about their forests were absolutely like somebody who was really green, somebody who was really conscious of the forest and knew what they're doing, so that they would never take more of a particular plant than could be used and so on. So we assumed, they got a really great green consciousness, okay? And had we assumed that and continued with that assumption, we would have destroyed their whole culture, because the reason that we thought they were green, is that they knew if they took too much of that particular plant, their grandmother's father's cousin's dog would die. It's entirely ritual based, entirely, okay? So had we come in sort of assuming, great green consciousness and all that, we would have immediately attacked their ritual basis of doing this, which would have started to unpeel the bases of their culture, okay? So we never did that. We did quite a few other things as well that finally became important in terms of their development, but mainly it allowed us to stop this encroachment coming up the Mentawai chain.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it worked.
Oh,
it
yeah,
worked a long
worked.
time.
But it took time. I mean, we finally had a team of locals, of about a dozen of them, who basically took all this over. And even, in fact, one of the supporters, interesting enough, was an Australian-based surfing group that surfed the Mentawai chain. And Surf Aid, I think they were called.
Okay.
But they wanted to help the local people. Okay, so we actually became involved with them to set up a Surf Aid program. Then I got the Australian government interested in what we might be doing up there. But because Surf Aid was the only Australian group that was on the Medawai chain,
Yeah, around at the time.
Foreign Affairs said, there must be an Australian counterpart here. They wanted to make this surfing group my boss.
Is that right?
For the United Nations. And I said, well, no, it doesn't work quite like that. You know? We finally worked out a deal, but that was sort of one of the side chains as well. But what all I'm saying about this is that, and there were lots of other times when we needed to do this. And as, for example, in Papua, as in the case of the Siberut Island, it meant working within the culture.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Not against it,
is
not
this something
ignorant.
that can be exported to? Because we all hear the horror stories about what's happening with the orangutans in Indonesia. That system you set up there, working within the culture, do you think there's still hope to use that on a larger scale over there?
We did that was in Kalimantan,
okay,
where that's happening. And we set up a program there. It's a while since I've retired, so I don't exactly know what's happening now. But what we were able to do was to set up a consortium of all of the industries around the main national park, Kutai National Park, where the apes and things are. And they actually agreed to form a kind of a barrier of protection and support. And they actually did this, and they were great. So we actually were able to get some support from that. And we also had people going in, of course, to work with the people, do something about the animals or whatever. I don't know what's happened recently.
Okay.
But it was at least somewhere starting to get something moving on that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Wow.
I was just thinking maybe you just briefly sketch a couple of things out of my past that sort of make the connections, which I was talking about before.
For sure.
Let me think. Yeah, just one of the things. As I told you before, I came through a strange background, and starting with a scientist, sort of moved into business and out of it quickly and became a sociologist.
We haven't even done the sociology thing yet with Wollongong University. So you're only 30 years old.
Yep.
And you set up the first sociology course in Australia, is it?
Not in Australia. No, there was the one in Melbourne at, which one? One of the Melbourne universities that had been set up for a couple of years before, New South Wales University, because I'd actually worked in New South Wales Uni in sociology for 3 years before I took the one here in Wollongong as well. But being only 30 years old, a little bit adventurous.
Yeah.
I didn't do quite what the university normally would expect, so they thought I was a bit weird because, for example, I had no tables and chairs in my seminar rooms at all, only cushions.
Oh.
So we could sit around and be cool.
Were you a hippie at all?
A hippie?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, excellent.
Yeah.
I like the hippies.
I became a hippie in Chicago, actually, when things were happening there, because I was involved. I happened to be in Chicago in 68. Okay, when the revolution, when the democracy revolution came up.
Is that the convention, the
yes,
Democratic Convention?
The riots. The Democratic Convention and the
famous
riots.
convention.
Oh, yeah,
wow,
yeah,
there's so many people there. That was a big, one of those knots in time, I think, where a lot of things sprung from that.
True, and one of the really interesting things, it was, the police were
brutal, weren't they?
Brutal.
Yeah.
Crowd clearance was driving a Jeep fast as they could down the street with barbed wire in the front. They were slashing the tyres on cars who were anywhere near the demonstration. But then, who was it? Paul Newman and, who's the woman at the time? They were delegates to the conference, okay?
Okay.
Now, there had already been riots.
Was it Jane Fonda, was it? No.
Yes.
Oh, was it? I thought so. She's always good.
No, it's not Jane Fonda. Well, maybe it was, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, but the point was that there had already been riots and things along the strip of suburbs that the people coming to the conference went to.
Yeah.
But Mayor Daley had already put big advertising signs all the way along, so they couldn't see it. Okay.
Is that right?
And when they were in the convention, they could not see anything about what was happening outside. They were totally enclosed. They had no knowledge of what was going on outside. But we outside had television to watch them inside.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what happened was that Paul Newman actually came in with the television because he heard something was going on outside, and he put it in the middle, and we could watch this happening. Okay.
Yeah.
And here wasn't Jane Fonda. What's her name? Anyway, it doesn't the point. The point is, it was famous actress. They looked at this, and they then led a demonstration group out to go to the students to support them.
Excellent. Yeah.
It was just fantastic, and so they really became involved. Meanwhile, I was in a university called Northwestern University on the north side of Chicago. It's where I was working.
Yep.
And these were the days, it was at the same time, these were the days when they had fraternities, okay, where men,
Yeah.
all, would have places where they could develop right-wing attitudes and look at the world outside with disdain, okay. And the black students decided, they said, look, they won't let us join. We can't get into a fraternity. We would like to set up our own fraternity. Now, the university by this time had decided, no, we will not have fraternities anymore. They think it's a very bad idea. So they refused the black students. So the black students decided they would take over an administration building in protest, okay?
Yep.
And they went to this, I was there, where they went to this building and they're standing out the front of it, sort of protesting and so on, and all the security guys are there, and several of the students started walking around the back. All of the security guys, being very intelligent gentlemen, went round the back, so they just walked in the front door and took it over, okay? And then the white left-wing students said, we want to support our black brothers, okay?
Yeah.
And the black brothers said, piss off, honky, this is ours. so what they did was take over another admin building. So we had a black admin building and a white admin building, separate from each other in protest. And at this stage, the fraternity men decided they would do something about this, okay? And they started to march down the main street through the middle of the university called Sheridan Road. And they were going to get rid of these black kids out of this place, that they had no right to be in. But the dean of students was a man who understood the world well.
Yep.
And he came out, stopped the students, the fraternity men, in the middle of Sheridan Road, and he said, you men take one more step forward, I will suspend you from the university. And they all went home thinking, oh God, we're going to do that this too.
Yeah.
So it stopped it. So a lot was happening in Chicago in those days where I started to become a hippie dub.
Yeah.
Image. Oh, it went away. Sorry.
Well, that is an image there.
Oh,
That's
right.
the one there.
Oh, good one. Good work.
Oh,
You got to pay for it.
there we go.
Is that the building?
It must be. Must be. Yeah, black
Fantastic.
student.
What an interesting time, wasn't it?
It was an extraordinary time in America. It really was.
The pendulum was swinging, but then it did swing back the other way quite far, didn't
Yes.
it? So these things tend to happen that way.
No, it did indeed.
Can you see it happening at Wollongong Uni anytime soon?
There's a major change with the new Vice-Chancellor.
a
Major change.
Yep.
She was previously Dean of Nursing at Johns Hopkins University in the States, which is the main medical university.
Yeah, for sure.
She has a background, she did 2 years of sociology with me at Wollongong,
Did she?
and she still remembers.
Is she?
Yeah, Patricia, you got it, Patricia Davidson.
Is Patricia Davidson an Australian that went over to
She's
the States?
Australian.
Okay, yep.
She's Australian, but her attitude is very open and
Good.
prepared to sort of develop a people and care-centred institution, including the focus of what Wollongong becomes famous for. Okay,
Yep.
so she is, I think, a major breath of fresh air to the place.
Oh, that's
It
fantastic.
really is, and that will develop.
Yeah, because I remember when my wife went there, she was there just when they got rid of the compulsory student unionism. And it seemed to me, as I used to go pick Haley up and everything, and the culture just kind of died a bit, the spark went out of it a little bit.
It became administratively controlled and self-driven, with the Vice-Chancellor who was more interested in himself than most other things.
Well, yes, he was. I don't want to say anything, but he was on a lot of money as well.
The salary started $1 million plus.
$1 million,
plus,
three
plus.
times more than the Prime Minister. And the thing that frustrates me, as someone that has kids that want to go to uni, that my son was looking at doing an arts degree. I went down to this nice uni in Melbourne. It was $80,000 for 2 years. And in Australia, I didn't realise. I looked into the fine details. In New Zealand, you can go bankrupt on a student loan. In Australia, you can't. That HECS debt.
Really?
No, it's just like the Americans.
We researched it a couple of weeks ago.
And they say it's interest free. It's not. It's actually linked to inflation. And if you're looking at inflation, we could be looking at 10% this year.
Wow.
So if my son had taken this arts degree, and he's an artist and he wants to be around artistic people, And we were happy to even, like, we thought it was 30 grand or something like that. And thought, well, that's too much anyway, but we'll go halves and he can put some money and, you know, we can do something with it. But $80,000 for a young person with that amount, he's never going to own a house. Like, this is life-changing money.
Wow.
And the thing that like when I hear that $1 million was the starting salary, then I'm like, well, that $1 million is paid for by the future of these kids.
And the arts degree has been doubled in price.
And what does that say about our political? They don't understand the arts.
No.
Like, a little rant. The future is the arts.
Of course it is.
You know, like, computers are going to come along. The factories aren't coming back. Nothing. The only thing that's going to survive is the creativity of the human mind. That's one thing the computers aren't going to be able to beat us at. I don't think, anyway.
Okay, totally agree.
So the arts are where it's at, and we're just hobbling ourselves. It's a shame.
And all but 2 prime ministers had arts degrees.
Yep.
And one was Howard and the other is Morrison.
Classic. There you go.
It's quite a good example already.
I also think if you look at, was it $1 trillion industry, what came out of England in the 1960s, looking at the Beatles, the Rolling, all those bands, all that whole music industry, which was not only a massive money maker, but it's one of the, when you look back at human history, you know, we've done a lot of bad things, but, you know, the Beatles and things like that was some of the best things we've ever done. And they all went to art college, you know, and they were, you know, sons of wharfies and things like that because they didn't have to pay for it. You know, like human endeavour could get you somewhere, and a human interest in something other than just money. So, yeah, it's a poorer country for it, I think.
And the other thing is, and a lot of people don't seem to realise this, the source of value in the economy has changed. It used to be particularly about big business and controlling stuff and so on. It's now very much to do with community, creativity-based activity and enterprise. If you look in particular to the Australia Institute, which is in Canberra, and very actively involved in the media and so on, Dennis, the chief economist there, has a view which is absolutely similar, at least what I would believe as well. And that's the 3 L's. Where you invest is local, labour and long-term. Okay?
Absolutely.
And I may have told you this, but I'm publishing literally right now a book on economics. It's coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, fantastic.
I mean, one does
What's the name of that book?
It's the second in. I'm working. I am now, I should say, a ongoing visiting professor in Kyoto, in Japan, in the Japan Center for the Creative Economy. Okay.
Yeah.
Kyoto is my favourite city.
Look, if you need someone to help you with the bags or something like that, I will be your man.
Kyoto is just amazing. In fact, just to digress on Kyoto for a second, it is so old, okay? So, for example, there's a restaurant that I've been to. In fact, we did a film at the restaurant when talking about this a little while back. We're working with a French filmmaker whose name's not on my brain at the moment, but he's quite famous. And he filmed what we were doing and so on. But we filmed the section with myself talking to this guy, Stormo Yamashita.
Yes, you have to tell us more about Stormo.
Oh, Stormo's great.
Yes.
He's a fabulous guy. But anyway, he filmed them in this restaurant. Now, the restaurant is 1,200 years old, continuously working for that time. And all they sell is mung beans and rice, barbecue stick and tea. Now, that beats the shit out of McDonald's. You know?
That's it.
For 1,200 years.
Look, that is how you, as a chef, that's my
of course it is.
my
That's
trade. When I go to a restaurant and I see a large menu, I just want to walk out. You know, no, give me 3 or 4 things on the menu, do them exceptionally well, and do them for 1,200 years. You know,
and that's most of the small Japanese restaurants you probably saw. That's what they do.
That's what you're doing. If you feel like something
they
else,
don't give you a menu. They just simply, this is what we're doing today.
This is what we've got. There's a Japanese show, one of my favourite TV shows. It's on Netflix. Midnight Diner. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's an actual diner. Opens in Tokyo at midnight till 7 in the morning.
Oh, really?
And he doesn't have a menu. Well, he's got one thing on the menu, but if he will cook you whatever. If you come in and if he can make it for you, hot dogs or what, he'll just make you. And those wonderful, he's in the middle and there's that bar around and it's so.
Oh yes,
it's a great. I want to go.
Actually,
there we go. That's it. Midnight Diner.
Stormo and I, we're in a restaurant. He's a very close friend of mine now, and I'll come back to Stormo in a minute because he's a very interesting man. But the thing was, we were sitting in one of the Japanese restaurants with what's the thing that goes around in the
Like sushi train. or
sushi
something.
train,
Yeah.
going past. And we thought, no, we're going to change this concept. What we'll do is have the chairs going around, not the sushi train.
Great.
And they can go through a back door into a place they can stay the night, while they're there, while the bed is sort of moving forwards and so on. And then the next day they can come back for breakfast round the other way.
Yeah.
We couldn't convince the guy to change his system, though. It was
It's clever, though. I like it.
well, it had a different concept, focus on the people. But seeing as we're in a Stormont, let's keep with Stormont for a moment, because it does connect back to what I did in the UN, interesting enough.
Okay, yeah.
And if you let, again, another side story to a side story.
There's so much. I was thinking how we're going to run this interview. We just can't do it as a linear thing, I don't think. There's just too much. We just got to branch off and see where we go.
Well, let me tell the Stormare story, because it's an important story. As I've told you, we haven't talked about this in the interview, but I work with using music and performance to heal children caught in conflict or trauma. Okay.
Yeah.
And I set up this, co-set up an NGO, which we eventually called Sacred Bridge. Pretty much as soon as I got to Indonesia, with a guy who became a very close friend, but unfortunately died 2-3 years back, Rano. And in fact, I'm actually still the patron, and we had a month-long concert last year, as a matter of fact, in January, the whole of January. Anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
The thing is that this worked remarkably well. I mean, the impact it had on kids was extraordinary. And I'll take you through that story before I come back to Stormo. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason, and the thing was this: we first worked with the children mainly across in Sumatra who were involved in conflict, in situations of conflict between Christians and Muslims. Okay.
Okay.
About 400 of them. Okay. There's a lot.
Yeah.
My next program was with the street gangs of Jakarta. Okay. And by this time, for whatever reason, I'd got total support from the government, and so they were prepared to allow me to run this thing in the National Museum. Okay.
Okay.
And I had while I was doing this, I had a visit from, at that time, the Director General of UNESCO, who's called Federico Mayor, a Spaniard who loved the world of women.
Oh, who doesn't?
And every time he'd come to my countries, he would bring his latest woman with him. It was from the Secretariat. And you could, I kid you not, honestly, the gradation from the Director General's office to the outside of the cabinet room, and I had an office in cabinet next to the DG for a period. Okay.
Yeah.
You could tell how close they were by how big their breasts were.
Wow, is that right?
It was sort of like a sequence, when you got there. So, but they were terrible when they came to my country, because their sense of privilege, of course, havoc all over the place.
Yeah,
But anyway, I had Mayor coming into town when I put on this exhibition, this program for the street gangs, and I realised that the outside of the museum had columns, and they were exactly out of the UNESCO logo. Okay, it looked like the logo. So what I did was have every column with UNESCO, 50-foot high letters. So when the director came, I was able to take him through his own logo to see this exhibition and do it with the kids. Anyway, there was one guy, a beautiful musician called Rusdi, and he was Gothic. He was a motorcycle kind of guy, and he played percussion primarily, and the kids adored this guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, and he was very creative. Like, for example, 2 examples. One, he had one concert that I partially supported, where his percussion instrument was a Kijang van with a person on each door slamming them. and another one, which I did support fully, we had about 6,000 people there, for this concert.
Brilliant.
It was outdoors. Yeah. And he comes on in the middle of this, of the stage, naked to the waist, and he sits in the chair, okay, and he's got this heart monitor attached to him, which is beating at about 150 decibels, okay, across all the loudspeaker system. So
brilliant.
Everybody, ba-boom, ka-boom, ka-boom. But every time his heart beat, he'd have this little umbrella go, a Japanese umbrella he'd open and shut. And the point of it was, this was the heart of the city, and his band caught the rhythm of his heart and built that into the music that then came from there. Okay?
That's a fantastic
idea. He was great, okay, and so the
Yeah.
kids loved him, and he was one of the key guys I had when I was working with the street gangs, okay. Now, the street gangs are serious. They kill about 100 people a year, as a matter of fact, Most of them, interesting enough, are actually related to school areas or schools.
Okay.
That's the sort of the
They
territory.
come out of the schools?
They come out of the school areas. I'm not exactly sure
Yeah.
they come out of the school or not, but they probably do a bit. You know.
What age? Below 20s?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that sort of. Oh well, maybe a little bit older too.
Okay.
but pretty serious. Anyway, the thing is that after I got them involved in the music and so on, which they were involved in performing as well, mainly percussion. Percussion, anyone can do it, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
really works really well. And but I got them together, because this is a peace thing between them, to together draw or paint posters of peace. Okay.
Yeah.
So these big posters of peace are laid out on the floor. And I came across one gang leader talking to another gang leader. My bloody poster of peace is better than your fucking poster of peace. No, that's not the point. And so we had to re-persuade them a little bit on that, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But as you know, because you've seen the film, but then we worked particularly with the children. This was later, after 2000. It was 2005, you know, when we started working with the children in Aceh.
Oh, yeah.
And that was so good, so powerful.
Yeah.
In about 8 weeks, the children were so traumatized.
This is after the
tsunami,
Boxing Day tsunami.
The Boxing Day tsunami.
100,000 people died, something like
No, much
that?
more.
Much more, was
much
it?
more. And 38,000 children died in Aceh.
Yep.
Okay. One school that I worked with, because one of my jobs was getting education, getting back again, 96% of the children were killed.
Oh,
so the
God.
ones coming back, there were only 6% left. I mean, imagine what that was like, you know,
Yeah.
for them.
Oh,
But the children, many of the children had lost all of their relatives, and sometimes that was 40 relatives they'd lost. Okay.
Jesus.
Some of the children had been swept by the wave up to 2 to 3 kilometres before they could hang onto a tree or find somewhere where they could save themselves. Okay, and they were just silent. Okay.
Yeah.
And I picked up the kids from the orphanages, particularly Mahana, one of the Islamic orphanages, Muhammadiyah. And when we started with them, they were frozen. They had nothing there. And what I've learned is, in fact, you can't get out of that by voice, by talking to them, getting through, because the story is fixed in their culture, in their mind, and everything else.
Yeah.
But what we could do is to help take them back to the basis of their self, which is back into their culture, and recreate a kind of a world for them through culture and music, and not voice. Okay.
Yep.
And that's what we did. And we worked with the chief poet of Aceh, who's a very lovely man, and the kids adored this guy, who'd tell them stories and so on. But what really mattered then too was to have discipline, not just allow the kids to play as they wanted. Discipline was critical, okay?
Yeah.
And to take one example, the girls in particular were involved in dance, not the boys. You know, this is a male-female thing in Islamic society, whatever.
Yep.
There's a dance called the fishing net dance, okay? And it's really, really fascinating to watch, because 7 or 8 girls, or young women, in a row with a single rope between them.
Yep.
In the course of the dance, they knit a fishing net.
Wow.
That's how the dance works. It's just
That sounds
extraordinary to
amazing.
watch.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary to watch, and it really is. But anyway, the point of all this is simply getting back to Stormore Yamashita, okay?
Yeah.
This was before the Aceh program, but after the ones before it. Could you?
Yeah, I'll top you up with this wonderful wine you brought over.
Oh, good. Anyway, when the turn of the millennium came in 2000, of course, I decided that I'd put on a concert, okay? A sacred music concert. And there's several stories around this, mainly concerning Stormo, but a bit more as well. The thing is that I was able to organise it in the 4 most sacred temples of Bali, okay?
Oh, wow.
I had sacred music groups, 20 sacred music groups from around the world, because what I wanted to show was that the United Nations and the world, if we're facing 1,000 years, we should not think of this in commercial terms. We must think of it in human and spiritual terms,
Yeah.
period, okay? Which is why I brought these groups in. We had many, many, many people, bands from Indonesia also involved in this. It was really quite a big thing. The side story to this is I had to raise $250,000 to do it, because I certainly didn't have any budget for this, okay?
Okay. Yep.
And because I'd prepared over a period of time, I'd got to know some of the ministers very well, you know, and good friends and so on. I got I knew basically what everything was happening right up to the palace, and so
Yeah.
on. But the thing is that through this, I got a guy called Rahadi Ramalan, who'd actually taken over a network I'd run for the UN before I joined the UN full time, to put on a benefit night at his property. Okay. Now, Rahadi, and I like this guy, he's very friendly, very open and so on. Rahadi had obviously saved well.
Yeah.
He had a property of 11 hectares, which used to be a village with 6 houses, one for his gamelan collection, another for his 60 cars, and one for his wife, and so on, one for his art collection, whatever. So he saved well on his $150 a month, okay, for his salary.
Oh, my word.
And we put on this evening, and it started with... have you ever seen, there's a form of gamelan called jegong, from the west of Bali.
Explain to the people what gamelan is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gamelan is, you usually see what look like tin pots,
Okay.
with playing. It's a pentatonic scale, which means that you can't really do anything that's out of tune
It's
with
going to
anything
be
else.
all right. It's the black keys on a piano almost.
Pretty much. But and it starts, interesting enough, it starts in a formal way. So but then it becomes improvised. Most of the middle of gamelan is improvised between, then they get it back to formal and comes back to what's happening.
It almost sounds jazz, but jazz.
It's sort of it's not like jazz, but that's the principle is similar.
The principle's similar. Yeah.
And in fact, at one stage, I when I was setting up these programs, I worked with a guy called Kumang, I think his name was Kumang in Bali, who was the main guru of gamelan for the whole of the island. Okay. And travelled the villages with him, and that was just fabulous because every village he went to, people wanted to play with this guy.
Yeah.
And so I learned some great things. But back to back to the funding. By the end of it started with 2 jegong bands things, and the jegong gamelan is totally different to these pot-looking things.
Okay.
It's played on bamboo pipes that may be 16 feet long and almost a foot wide,
Wow.
down to small ones. And the guy sits on a saddle up the top of it and plays down on these bamboo pipes. It's amazingly dramatic. And the classical way of doing it is like dueling banjos, with one gamelan going against the other one, and they come jigging against the other. And it's just brilliant. That's how we started this evening, okay?
Yeah.
And because he was the Minister of Trade and Industry, people sort of, in the Indonesian context, sort of feel they'd be helpful to help gifts to make favour with the man who's responsible as a minister. So they did. And at the end of the evening, we had raised $250,000, and he showed me the votes of money and so on. Now, several weeks later, I didn't have any of it. Okay, it had all disappeared somewhere.
Oh, no.
And because I had contacts and so on, I've checked around informally to find out what had actually happened. And it turned out that the woman who ran the evening, who was a director of one department in his ministry, was also his mistress. And she had decided for her own artistic pursuits to take 60% of the money. Okay.
Yeah.
At this stage, his wife found out and she took the rest. So I'm sitting in the middle of this high-level love triangle of corruption and no money. And I'd already started contracts with people to come out from international, overseas to get them there.
Yeah.
And this is where I learned I applied one fundamental rule which I found of international diplomacy, which is never confront, but surround. Okay?
Yes, yeah.
And so what I did was I wrote a highly effusive letter, congratulatory letter to Rahadi saying, look, it's such an important evening that you've created and this money that you've raised that you showed me, following specific things just to put
it was there.
Yeah, it was there. That, look, we have to celebrate this and show the world how important the things are that you have done. And I sent it to him through my deputy, who had the diplomatic privilege as a diplomat, to take it directly to his desk, not to give it to an assistant, but to give it to him personally, which mattered. And the end of the letter said it was such an important thing that I have already organised for the entire press corps of Jakarta to be on your doorstep at 9 o'clock Monday morning for the initial handover ceremony. And I dread to think what his weekend was like with his mistress and his wife.
Do you think he got the money back off them, or did he have to come up with it somewhere else?
I didn't actually explore that.
Yes.
However, I got nearly all the money back. It took 2 goes to get it, but I got most of it
That's
back.
a brilliant way of doing it. So you're not being offensive or anything.
Oh, if I challenged him, he would have said rubbish, and pissed me off.
Absolutely.
Would have got nothing.
Do you think he knew what you were doing?
very likely.
Yeah,
Very likely.
but you played the game a bit better.
Yeah, but anyway, Stormo is the one I'm talking about.
Yes, Stormo, the Japanese musician. He sounds
Right.
He's a percussionist. You were saying
Mainly, but he can play anything else, but he mainly plays percussion.
Is that him?
is this Stormo?
Yeah, probably. Yes, it is. It's Stormo.
Oh man, he looks like a cat.
Oh, he was.
Yeah,
He was rated by Time magazine as the most famous Japanese man in the world in the late 70s as a musician.
Is that right?
When Mick Jagger comes to Japan, this was a few years ago now, to travel, he plays with Stormo. Okay,
Wow.
he was part of that scene.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he was actually a classical musician. He was playing almost a teenager internationally, but then he took on being a pop muso in Britain, I think it was, where his base
Did
was.
he really? Okay.
And he became very famous in what he was doing. But he then decided that it wasn't teaching him enough, so he just became a monk.
Really?
He just stopped being a major pop musician or rock musician and became a monk, okay, for 3 years. Okay,
That's it.
and his job for 3 years by the abbot was to clean out a temple. Okay, that was his job. It took him 3 years to clean it out and fix it up. Came back to the abbot and said, "Your abbotness, what do I do next?" And the abbot said, "I think you should go.
Go play some music.
Your music is made for the world, not for here." Now, what Stormo then did he found a guy called Maeda, who had access to a stone from a temple, from an island called Sanyukite, north of Japan. It's a
Okay.
volcanic stone, and he is the only person allowed to use it. It is sacred. Okay, it has extraordinary tonal properties. I mean, the overtones go forever up in the sky. In terms of what
Wow.
the sound is. It's an amazing sound. Okay.
Yep.
And he's created an instrument which has got a number of. A pity I've got photos of all this. I could have given them to you, but anyway,
Oh,
the thing is,
we can put them in
can you?
later.
Oh,
Yeah,
good,
for sure.
good. It's probably about 5 or maybe 6 elements in it. One looks like a xylophone, another one looks like a dynamo with things around the edges and so on.
Okay.
All
yeah.
different shapes and so on. But the pitch range is 106. Okay, that's much bigger than a piano. It's extraordinary.
Wow. Yeah.
And what he does specifically is to play this to bring different cultures or religions together in peace. Okay, so every year I go there. They bring me up until COVID to Kyoto to work with these
Yeah.
guys and actually lead this program. Every year when this happens, Stormo puts on a performance at one of the major Buddhist temples, but it's to bring Buddhism and Shinto together. Okay, and they've never done it for 800 years.
Wow.
They haven't come
Okay.
together. And I asked Stormo, I said, why hadn't they done it before? He said, I guess they never thought about it.
Yeah. I always considered Shinto as an offshoot of Buddhism, or is it a completely different thing?
No, it's more a culture of the people rather than Buddhism itself.
Okay.
The values are sort of very much aligned, but it's not the same at all.
Yeah.
But the ceremony is extraordinary because it's in this quite a big temple with gardens around it, and the Shinto come. Everyone's dressed up in their robes or whatever.
Yeah.
And the Shinto come from the far distance of the garden, getting louder and louder and louder till they come in and they're connecting in their music. Okay.
Yeah.
With what Stormo is playing in his.
That's
instrument.
fantastic. Yeah.
And there was a really interesting thing last time I was there because they brought out a choir from France, choral choir, where they play layer upon layer.
Yeah.
Name's down in my brain at the moment.
I know what you mean. I've been listening to a Dutch Ernst Reitzeiger, and he does this layered. Or they don't even sing words. I don't think it's
No.
just these tones.
The tones
It's
are built on each other.
incredible.
Yeah. But when they came out to Stormo invited them out. I think funded them to play at this temple at the same time.
Yeah.
And-
That would have been. You were there.
Yeah, I was there.
Wow, that's
it's a Gregorian
fantastic.
thing. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Gregorian chant.
Gregorian chant.
Yeah.
And but it didn't work. This was in the performances when they're practicing it in advance. And the why it didn't work was they were playing in a wooden temple. In Europe, they play in stone.
Oh,
And so
you
the
get
reverberations comes back, and in the wooden temple they could not hear the tones below and connect them together. So they
Yeah.
had to set up a whole microphone system and so on to actually make it work. Okay, which itself was kind of interesting about the difference between the building. You would never expect that to make
absolutely.
a difference. You know?
Well, I think everything starts in place.
Yeah.
If you're going to write a story, you've got to put it somewhere
Right.
first. Yeah.
So Stormo came out of this, and he's become a very close friend of mine. But what then happened was that Rano, the man that I mentioned before from Indonesia, who's my friend, we set up this Sacred Bridge organization with.
Yeah.
He asked Stormo and me to come up to Bali. Must have been 2014, 15, something like that. Because he wanted to build a culture centre, but at village level, and to communicate with village level people in other countries rather than internationally through the through the foreign affairs or whatever else. So we went around the Bali and we started looking at this. But that didn't happen. What did happen is my connection with Stormo, because at that time, the university in Kyoto, which is Doshisha, had just established under Japan to become Japan's centre for the creative economy. Okay. And with these guys, I helped them design programs where we brought in the best people in the world to talk about a new economics. Okay. And my basic philosophy in that is to say economics is fundamentally about self-interest at the moment. And self-interest, in fact, is destructive of things such as inequality and the ways that people are able to actually, live in a world that's serious. In other words, my fundamental philosophy is to say that economics self-interest-based economics currently provides, as it were, the grammar of the expression of humanity. Yeah. And humanity should be providing the grammar for the expression of economics. As simple as that. All right?
Well, because it's just wrong as well. People, aren't rational actors when it comes to just purchasing things. They generally don't. They care more about their family,
of course,
and friends than they do about themselves.
And the consequence is absolute in terms of creating inequality. I mean, the level of inequality is amazing. 6 men own as much wealth as 50% of the world.
Yeah, and there's definitely a problem, and it's. I don't know, but those 6 people with 0.1 of 1%, they own the media.
Exactly.
And so
right.
I think what you were talking about before, going village to village, you kind of have to do that. It's almost like you have to go back to the town hall meetings and meet people face to face, because if you try to use one of these media platforms, it's just not going to work because they don't want it to work. So I've noticed that. That if you have say you want to free Assange or something like that, you'll want to commit suicide because they'll just show you nothing about negative stuff and you'll think you're all alone. And that's where I think going to a protest won't change the people in power's minds, but at least you'll know you're not alone. Yeah. And there's a lot of people think the same way. And I think town hall meetings and I like what you're talking about the music, because they're bringing it. Everything's so heavy at the moment. Isn't it? Whereas as a musician as well, so I'm trying to think, how can I use what I do to inform but not preach? And the world's a great place. We're in a major changing time, and the new economic. In some ways, I'm with Marx in that you can trace it back to economics. I think what you're doing is a great idea, because follow the money.
Well, I published the first book about that in 2018, okay? Yeah. And I called it the Kyoto Manifesto for Global Economics, the platform of, community, humanity and spirituality. That was the first book, okay? And it was bringing together the people we'd caught. And so, for example, but then I was bringing in continuous, or they as well, of course, together, we were working together, people from all over the world. And there's a movement called the circular economy movement in Europe, for example, right now.
I've heard of that.
It's business-based, and the whole point of it is to recycle everything, absolutely everything, which doesn't mean just fixing what comes out the end of the product. It means entire redesign of the nature of the production itself.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anyway, I knew the woman who was particularly leading this in Europe, called Ladeja Kosir, okay? And I invited her to come out to Kyoto to talk about it. And if I can go again back to side stories, because the side stories within side stories. Stories. The thing was that when I first set up the department in Wollongong, there are a few things of sociology.
Sociology department, yep.
The first part of this story is the fact that when I got the job, I'd come out from England, and I was in my sort of hippie-ish time. So I had to buy a suit in England. Okay, so this is coming back to the point of a minute.
Chicago, then England, and then back to Australia?
New South Wales University, then Wollongong after that. Yes, then back to Australia.
Yep.
But I was also working 3/3 of the time in Thailand all that time. for the University of Sussex on developing the sort of things we were just talking about before.
Yeah, okay.
And that had lots of interesting stories on the side as well. But the point is that when I got to this, I was brought out, the university brought me out from England, where I was at the time when I was appointed, and I had to buy a suit. Okay, so I built this winter in England suit about 2 inches thick of wool, midsummer in Australia. And of course, being brown, as I thought appropriately, I had to buy a fairly bright yellow shirt to go with this. Okay, and just before I got to the interview, I had to go to the toilet, of course. And I did not notice that I'd actually left the corner of my yellow shirt sticking out of my fly when I arrived for the meeting. And they still appointed me, the idiots. The thing was that, particularly Jim Hagan, who's a great guy, he's a historian, whatever, he wanted to do things on, wanted sociologists to work on immigration, industry, things that Wollongong was about. And I said, okay, that's fine. I've done a bit of work on most of that. But what you really need is somebody who knows the nature of the knowledge behind it. And I was working into an area of sociology of consciousness, okay, phenomenology. Now, this is coming back to Stormer.
Absolutely. I love it. I've been reading a bit about phenomenology. I'm actually reading a book on it at the moment.
Indeed?
So phenomenons, physical, actual, touchable things, as opposed to the ethereal connections.
Yes. Anyway, and somehow I'd been able to attract the guru in the field from Harvard and then Germany, called Tom Luckman. Okay, he came to work with me for 6 months, in Australia.
Came down to Wollongong.
Yes,
wow.
And this was the first year of my job. Okay, and everyone was a bit impressed by that. But anyway, the point of the connection is this: I got Ladija out from Germany, from Slovenia, I should say, to come to Indonesia to talk about this movement. And I was talking to Ladija about the what we're doing and so on. And I said, look, we just went back, we were talking about ideas and stuff. And I said, I used to work with on phenomenology. I used to get Tom Luckman to come. He came out to work with me. That's my stepfather.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Incredible connection to this remote woman in Slovenia on circular economy stuff.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we have a very good relationship since that.
That's great.
So that was the first book. The second one is publishing literally now.
Yeah, it's a follow-up to that book.
It's a follow-up, but it's called the Kyoto Post-COVID Manifesto for Global Economics, Confronting Our Shattered Society, okay? And I've written almost to that, nearly all of that myself. But it's the message the same, but in the context of what difference COVID has actually made for a lot of things going on right now.
Well, economically, it's such a big change. I think geopolitically, if you look what's happening with the world island, Russia, China, India now, like this is some big things going on, and it's I don't know, they'll be studying this in 1,000 years.
Well, what I found more attractive than anything was something that never happened when it was my career to have publications and stuff, which I did a lot of course.
Yeah.
And I sent the manuscript to the publisher Springer, and I was working through the Tokyo office because I was working with this institute in Japan. And within 7 hours, they answered saying, "We love your book. We're going to publish it immediately."
Wow.
Now, this is not usual.
They'd already read it.
She quoted back things that she'd actually read and said, "I like this particular bits," and so on and so on. And it was into production 3 weeks later. Okay.
Wow.
So that's been really good. And they also accepted that I've decided that most books are pretty boring because you've got to read them.
Yeah.
So I've developed pictures to tell the story. And I sent them a picture because Spring had never done it before. And it's about the difference between, with images and so on. I just constructed it myself. And she said, they told me the story of the book in a second. You can have them all. So the book now has pictures for it, for the whole book, for the introduction and the 2 conclusions chapters I've written as well. So it's a way of sort of communicating.
Yeah.
So people can read and see and so on. Anyway, that's coming out literally within weeks right now.
For the first Kyoto book you did you get, what was the, what did the professionals, the economists think about it?
The ones that I liked, loved it.
They're the only ones that matter.
Yeah, of course it is.
I find, I think if you're going to do economics, you might as well bring your tarot cards out at the same time. And
No, but the key thing is this. In parallel and a bit afterwards, there's quite a strong movement coming out of Oxford University, and also the head of the British economy before, whatever his name was, who's now gone to the UN, saying very, very similar things. Okay. So it's becoming a new way of thinking about economics. Okay.
And and tying that into the what was the 100%? The lady you're talking about, lovely civilian lady. That's
no, she wasn't the one about the book. She's writing.
Yeah, she's doing the.
She wrote a chapter for me because what I did was I've written the message and then I've got people selected to write particular things that are experts on that particular area, so we can build that into the argument.
And she's talking about designing things 100% of their life cycle. It reminds me of a really saying I love from Buckminster Fuller. He was talking about there's no such thing as where is he?
He's good.
Oh, he's good. He's onto it. No such things as rubbish, as waste. That's just a resource in the wrong place. And Bucky was talking about. He's my favourite. He's kind of my guru, And
Absolutely.
He's talking about the stuff in the 1920s.
Yeah, I know.
It's a design science, and personally, he tried to get away from politics altogether. And he made a point which I only used the other day. I think it's really valid that. If we left it up to politicians, we'd still be hanging out in trees chucking stones at each other. The way society changes is through design and engineering. If you have two tribes and they're drowning, they're a left tribe and a right tribe, and they got to cross this river and they're fighting over the river, and there's X amount of deaths every year. You don't have to talk to either of them. All you have to do is build a bridge, and the people will use the bridge. It doesn't need to be a political discussion about that bridge. You just need to build it. But this goes back to, I think, a problem we're finding in the West. One of our major problems with our democracy is the way they've gone. Australia's classic example is the NBN, where you have this thing which just should be a normal piece of infrastructure. Should be apolitical. It doesn't matter. But political party A decides to do it. 3 years later, political party B gets in and decides to wreck it because they don't want a legacy for party A.
Yeah.
So, do you see any way around that? We're getting off topic a little bit, but that's with your economics, there's so much going on, though, isn't it? There's a whole. We know the ideas of what's the right thing to do. I asked you before when we met at the cafe whether you thought this new economics could happen within the system or will it need to happen outside the system?
The starting point is at the level of community and building from there, and it's very possible to build internationally from there.
Excellent.
And if I may tell you a story.
Another
story.
Yeah, I love them. This is great.
And it is back into the UN. But it's certainly about how to make the international connection work. Okay, but it started because when I arrived in Jakarta, the office I took over had been the science office of UNESCO since number 2 office in the world that they created to go way back.
Okay,
but they hadn't done anything else. Okay, and UNESCO is its mandate for the United Nations is responsible for science, education, social science, culture, and therefore world heritage, and media freedom. Okay, that was my mandate.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah,
and that's a pretty broad mandate. A lot of things you can need to do. Anyway, so I was able to start building in each of the other areas into my office. So I started with an office of 25 and ended up with about 120 by the time I left, or something like that, and other things all over the place. But the point was that. What we did first was to go out to the islands in Jakarta Bay, okay, and work with the fishermen on the islands to show them how they could actually make more money by not tossing stuff into the ocean, by actually using the ocean or the products coming out of the ocean apart from fish, to actually make money, okay, and that worked, and we started. Not that was where all the pollution in Jakarta Bay was coming from, but it was certainly one of the areas. But and Jakarta Bay, if you've ever been there, certainly when I was there, you go 30 kilometres out from Jakarta itself, and it's still polluted. It's just
Really? Yeah.
crap all over there, because there's 7 or 8 river systems that come down from the mountains through Jakarta. And, for example, the markets and the people, they just throw everything into the river going past, and it goes out into the bay.
There's an image.
Yes, that's exactly what it's like.
Yep.
And that goes out 30 kilometres. Okay.
Yep.
So what we did, we worked with them first, but what I then did, and these people are magic, I brought in the children from the schools to go out to the islands to have a look and get excited about it, okay?
Yep.
And then we brought them back, and we sent them around the markets, the traditional markets, to talk to the people in the markets. Of course, children, you can't stop them. You can't stop,
Yeah.
And they said, and they showed them, and we could prove to them that they could make 30% more money by saving the stuff and doing something different with it, okay?
Yeah.
But the children were my ambassadors, okay? They worked brilliantly.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Okay,
Yep.
now the next stage was then to choose 3 villages where I put it into practice, okay?
Yep.
One of them, and this is a side story to the side story within the side story, when the May 1998 revolution came, Chinese were at risk fundamentally, because a lot of it was absolutely staged. Behind it was Prabowo and militia that he'd personally paid, brought into town,
Okay.
were loaded off trucks, one after another, just to attack different areas. I mean, it was totally controlled.
Wow. Okay.
In fact, for me, I actually had to escape my house.
They're after you as well.
I was living in a reasonably Chinese area, but still.
Yeah.
What had happened was that already the local shopping centre was flames, and the people had products they'd been able to take out of it, and they were going past my house back to their village.
Okay.
In the distance, I could hear the really serious mobs coming. I could hear them. Okay. At this stage, I had 2 guards, Satpans, who were supposed to be responsible for my security. I found them dressed in civvies, jumping over the fence, running away. And I thought, this is not a good situation. My only protection at this stage was about a 1-foot high Tibetan spaniel. Okay,
Yeah.
And if you don't know about Tibetan spaniels, what look like lions on Tibetan temples are spaniels. Okay?
Are they?
Yes,
really?
they're
That's
dogs.
them.
They're
The
dogs.
Okay.
Because they're incredible guard dogs, okay? And this little guy would attack any bloody thing, no matter how big it was, it was incredible.
He'd have a go.
But
Yeah.
that didn't seem like it was enough, So
No.
so I had to escape, and literally at 2 o'clock in the morning through the mobs and the fires, and we got out of it, and a lot of other things happened after that. But still, we got out. And then I had to evacuate all the... First thing I did was get the families out straight away. And then after this, I got my own staff. It got worse and worse. And I got my own staff to, if they were locals, I sent them back to their village because they were safe. And I had already set up a very careful system of communication, which went through layers, okay? So, for example, if the communication didn't get through to this guy, it went to the next one, who then did all the other ones below him as well.
Okay.
And I also involved all of the staff of the people, in case they weren't in the house, to take the next step as well. Anyway, this actually saved the lives of 2 people, 2 women, who would have been otherwise caught up in the middle of this, but we were able to get messages to them.
Yeah.
And I could get to everybody in my offices within 20 minutes. 20 minutes, okay, to get them out.
Brilliant.
That worked. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we did a lot. But in the middle of all this, when the revolution hit, we were talking about the
We're talking. The what?
Prabowo.
oh sorry, Prabowo, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So he was sort of behind the scenes, causing most of the problems which were going on and so on. And we got the people out and so on. But then we had to then actually adjust to this, and this is when I moved my house from the university, the building, I should say, UNESCO, across to another building and in the suburbs and so on and so on. Okay, but they were sort of interesting, as it were, times.
Yeah, for sure.
But Prabowo was sort of very much behind this, and he was behind what was going on in Papua as well. And so we had quite a lot of conflict going on at the same time as the revolution was going by.
Yep. Oh my word.
Interesting times.
Yeah. They don't seem to have stopped either, do they?
Yeah.
This is great.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, if you're interested to explore this, we can sort of again look at.
We were going to go back to Stromo, I think.
I'm sorry, of course we were.
And you. How did you end up at Kyoto University? This was the arc that we're coming back around to.
Stormo was involved. He made this connection back to the economics group in Kyoto that had just been established.
Yes.
And that then became what we're doing. Okay. Now, Stormo and I have become very close friends. Okay, and we work together a lot. And he has these. He's sort of behind the scenes rather than in the middle of anything that we're doing. But his values and what he does in music are absolutely what we're trying to do in words and ways of talking about economics.
Yeah.
It's the same. And to me, what is happening, as I was saying before, is that it's coming back fundamentally to the people and to intersubjective relationships. Now, the story I didn't quite finish, I'm sorry, now I know where I am, was about this working with the village people on environmental issues in Indonesia.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just lost myself in a minute.
No, that's cool.
And but one of the villages that we'd already brought the people together, and it was both Chinese and Japanese people in this village, okay?
Yeah.
This squad of people coming in to kill the Chinese arrived at the village, and all of the Japanese men stood around the whole village and pissed them off and said, "Go away," and they succeeded.
Wow.
They saved the Chinese because for the first time, the village, because we'd done it around environmental issues, had become cohesive. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they protected the Chinese. Okay. Now, the village that I worked on most was a village called Manjusari. Okay, and it was a not total slum, but it was a sort of a very, very low-income village, village within Jakarta.
Okay. Yep.
Sort of expressways nearby, over the top, almost part of it anyway. And but we had connections into Manjusari, and we started to work with the people about building their own environment to be a green environment, okay?
Yep.
And they became very interested in doing this. So, for example, we got them to grow organic plants and so on, so they could actually sell them and make money out of it. We got them growing plants they could take along and to hire in high-rise buildings for offices and things, so they could hire them out and make money from them.
Yep.
The young people became involved in recycling paper and so on and so on. So to take the example, which I may have mentioned, I think, before we started speaking here, I was able to they started working on origami, and I was able to get somebody
I saw the photos. We'll put them up.
Good. Wonderful? Yeah. From Tokyo to come out to show what was selling in department stores in Tokyo, and they did that. And then they did something really good all by themselves. And I've got 2 of these at home. Kerosene tins, which is about 2 feet, 3 to 3 foot, that size. Whatever. What they did was to paint the outside of them with cartoon characters about environmental friendliness, okay? They're really quite good.
Yep.
And they took them out on the streets. It cost them 50 cents to get the tin and make it, and they're selling for $5 or equivalent. And within the first day, a French guy came along and bought 150, okay?
Wow.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And the young people, of course, involved in doing this and got really excited and so on. So, and we kept doing this, and we then had I did 2 key things where I had a major launching of something. One was to launch a garbage bin, okay?
Yep.
Because we had to develop a garbage bin for the community that would separate where they could separate the luggage, okay?
Okay, yep.
Secondly, it couldn't be for every house because they're too close together. So it had to be close enough that they would walk there to put their rubbish in it, but not too far. Okay.
Yeah.
So we had to organise exactly where these bins went, and we got them to choose how to make it. I set up a contest for them to make this bin with a prize.
Yeah.
And there was basically a 44-gallon drum with different ways you stuck things in and out and so on, which worked really in different colours. Okay, which worked really well. And I launched this garbage bin officially on behalf of the United Nations. I thought that was quite useful.
That's great.
But then I did another job where I launched a carry cart for the young kids or guys that did the penniless who used to sort of collect the rubbish. Okay.
Yep.
And I gave them the job of setting up their carts so that they could separate the rubbish when they got it. And it was a very simple thing. They stuck a thing down the middle, and that was what I had an official ceremony to give them a prize for designing this cart. Okay. So they got really involved in it, and it became a really big thing. And then companies doing herbal products and medicine and so on became involved and built companies and businesses there, and it became declared by the mayor of Jakarta as the governor of Jakarta as the ecotourism site of Jakarta, the city. Okay, this village,
Yeah.
which is amazing, and that of course led more people. Now, my point of telling the story was about the international bit. Okay.
Yep.
And my point about that is that you create something that is real, that can be seen and is community level, where people can understand it and connect it and do it themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
And then draw people in. But so we had, I think probably, at least when I left, about 220 different groups that came in every year. Okay. I was able to build these things, or to get them accepted by the Navy, so that they build the same arrangement around the naval depots, the villages close to the naval depots.
Yep.
I got the Boy Scouts movement involved, of 1 million young men involved, and they came and they took it back to their villages, and they did it around
that's amazing.
Indonesia, and we're getting people internationally coming in as well. But again, we then had people who could mentor and even go there if we wanted them to follow them up. Okay, so for me, coming back to your question about how do you make change happen, I believe you make change happen where the people are and where subjective interaction is, and that's at the community. It is not at international formal meetings at all.
Yep.
You build it there, you make it really work, and you then build connections with follow-up that allow it to start spreading to become a global, more interested movement. And as I've said earlier, the key thing, I think, right now in the movement in economics, and this is also the position of the Australia Institute, is that it's fundamentally back to the local, to the culture, to the community, which is where creativity is and where the individual is. And if you look at the sources of wealth, particularly that have come out of, for example, of the new entrepreneurs who've done lots of things, who've created Facebook and all those sorts of things. They've come out of a guy in a garage,
Yeah, absolutely.
So what you then have to do is more than that, okay? You have to build an environment that is nutritive for these things to happen, okay?
You got to have good soil. That's a class. That's what I've been saying.
Yeah.
That's my saying a million times about the music industry. Like, we're going back to the Beatles.
Yeah.
The Beatles, if they'd landed probably in Wollongong now, they'd end up being teachers or something. It wouldn't happen because there's not the soil here. There's not. You got to have the crowd to come to see the show. You've got to have people putting on the shows, artists around and stuff. You got to have. They had to have record producers there ready to put these things out. Without that soil, without good soil, the seed will just die, no matter how good the seed is.
Absolutely right. No, that is basic, and that's what I've found exactly the same.
Yep.
You've got to build a nutritive environment. There's some really interesting lessons out of India, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a university, for example, which is the Barefoot University, that works specifically with village, and particularly village women, introducing things like eco-friendly production systems and whatever the hell else.
Yeah.
And the women, they're absolutely untrained in anything, illiterate.
Yeah.
But they learn it and they become the hub for other things to happen.
I might have seen something similar to that happen in Africa, where they're setting up, there's a program to set up solar panels, but originally they go into villages, and because there's no lights there, so the kids, they have to work and then they go to study and there's no light. So solar panels will at least give them a bit of light at night time. But they're finding they can't have engineers going out setting these things up, so they want to train the locals. They started training local men, and they would just basically bugger off with the solar panels and that. And the young mums were too busy with the kids, so it's actually the grandmothers.
Yes.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That's what.
Similar
this program, same thing.
Similar thing,
India.
Exactly. And also they're I think the grandmothers, they're the foundation of the culture. Really, I think us men are pretty useless at keeping things together and calling each other up and seeing how we are. But old ladies are where it's at.
They're a power.
They are the babushkas. That's where it's at.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely hope there, isn't it? I think, and it's everywhere. And it's like what I can see is that there's a massive change going on, and there's a way out of it, and it's going to be a better way. But, it's like Bucky said again, we're in a birth canal, and it's the most dangerous place for a baby. And so we've got to get through this. We've only got one planet We've got to look after it, and the system we have at the moment isn't doing it.
And it's running out fast.
It's running out fast, but all the answers are there. You know, we can, well, you know, you take your mobile phone. If you go back to the 60s, same with that, computing power would weigh probably 30 ton or something, you know. So we can do more and more with less and less. And I think, to talk about them again, our economic system was one based on Malthusian idea that there's not enough to go around. There is now. You know, the earth, you know, we produce a lot of things. There's enough for everyone. So we need to go from an economics of scarcity to almost an economics of abundance. And how do we reshape our societies now that there is enough? You know, can the monkeys, as we are, get over our primal instincts and actually help each other out?
That's critical for the future. I totally agree with you about that.
Yes.
But I also think it starts at the level of the people and their subjective world, not at the level of big...
It's not top-down.
Political. No, it's not top-down at all. And that is reflected in the nature of the movements in economics, generally.
Yeah.
It is actually changing in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
and
fantastic.
to me, this has to be the future of humanity. It comes back to our actual subjective humanness, not systems of abstract economic criteria and politicians making great declarations. It's not that at all.
And homogeneity, is that even a word?
Can be.
Like we're talking
It
about...
is now.
It is now. But I've been thinking about Japan a lot. Number one, I found a show on TV. It's great. It's called Old Enough. And it's about Japanese kids' first errand. And they get these little 2-year-olds, and mum will get the 2-year-old to go down the shop and buy some apples. And they follow and it's a kilometre walk along a main road.
Wow.
You
really?
know, I've got a 3-year-old. There's no way.
God, that's brave.
It's amazing. They follow these kids around. And the kids, it's great TV. You got to watch. It's called Old Enough.
Oh, wow.
And I've watched like 20 of these bloody things so far. And I'm glad Japanese culture exists. You know, like we're kind of going off the economic thing now, but I think there's a debate about liberalism. Japanese culture has its own idiosyncrasies. It's got a culture, but if it was a Western liberal democracy, would it have to become a multicultural place and lose its identity? Is there a place for individual cultural identity in the world if we're now a multicultural world and everything's, you know, can you even have that discussion without sounding racist? I'm not sure.
One of the things about going to Japan is that anywhere you go, it's safe, always.
Yes.
Male, female, day,
That's
night.
what it's shown with these 2-year-old kids walking down the road.
It is safe.
We couldn't do it in Australia.
No, but
You know.
it's safe from people causing problems for you. I mean, it's just an extraordinary culture like that. And then behind this is a lot of cultural things that have happened that have been built into the institutional structures or the fabric of life. And I'll give you one very important one. And it is it came out of longer term longer term industrial development from, you know, some long 100, 200 years ago. But it's still applied in a number of companies now, and it's a basic rule. And it's the 3-party rule. In other words, anything we do is good for us, for the client, and for the society. And if it's not good for all three, it doesn't happen.
That's brilliant.
Isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, it's better than the Chinese win-win, because that's only 2. It's got to be 3.
Absolutely.
There's always an extra party there.
Always. And the thing about that is then it's built into the culture of the organisation. So, and I talk about culture a lot, and I don't want to make it sort of sound trivial. The culture is the meaning system by which we do things, or the live by, okay?
Yeah.
It's creating as it were, the surrounding balloon within which we are living and operating and making sense of the world, okay?
Yeah.
And, for example, if you look at people coming together, you'll find that 2 cultures may be clashing and the balloons crash. But you'll also find ways in which you get interactions between them when they start to get some kind of cohesion about the overall way of doing things. So, for example, what then moves through, it's not just agreeing with this is sort of philosophy, is then built into the way that the organisation runs. So, for example, there's a new particular way of doing things, which is called the amoeba principle. Okay, in other words, the working groups are small. Okay,
Yep.
and I absolutely support this because it allows you to create the culture of people actually working together, and living together and having subjective relations and so on. But the normative structure of each of these groups within the overall organisation is one where these three basic principles are absolute for all of them. Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you are, what you're going to do next, wherever you go in the organisation, the same principles are there as part of the overall culture and the way of doing things and the meaning of things in that organisation as a whole. And that's how you can create it.
And I suppose Western capitalism, the fundamental problem with it is that there is no third party. And so if you and I do a deal, which is great for us, but it means that Adam's going to choke, we don't care because...
I care about Adam.
Yeah, we care about Adam.
He's looking after the bloody...
He's doing a good job there. But that's right. Well, I suppose the classic is the environmental problem. Like even if it's just oil spills or things like that, you and I do a deal. We save some money on some safety equipment and all that, and let's say the Congo gets flooded with oil, but it's not our problem.
Yep.
So that's that's a structural change that's got to happen. But at least we've got a starting point. That's bloody great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. We've been going almost 2 hours now.
Oh, well, have we really? I'm so sorry.
No, this is great. We could keep going, but I think we might have to get you back on.
Let me just start soonish with one story.
Yeah, please do.
Just one, because there's a few other things I didn't talk about, which I was going to, but this one particularly.
Well, we can keep going if you're all right. I don't mind.
I don't care. I'm not going anywhere much. But
I'll have another beer.
Well, have another beer. Right. We could still, let's try and finish this bottle of wine then.
I don't need to try. No, it's only that I found being a little creative at times kind of helped a lot in terms of doing things, and this is even in the diplomatic world in particular, And the particular story I was going to tell you was this about Fidel Ramos, who's the president of the Philippines, okay?
Yep.
He was the guy who was behind the signing of the final peace within the Mindanao and so on in 1996.
That was after Marcos, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Was he the next one after Marcos?
No.
There's one.
No, there was a guy before him. But Ramos was, anyway, but I really liked this guy, and we got on personally very well as well. And but one of my jobs was to get every one of my presidents to sign an international ocean treaty, charter, okay. It wasn't mandatory, it basically said, we think oceans are good, we'll do what we can to make sure we save them,
Okay, yep.
And in the case of Habibie from Indonesia, he put on this incredible display out at Manado in Sulawesi, with flypasts of planes and ships and foremast and schooners, and it was just amazing sort of stuff. And it was just bullshit, But still, it was we signed a lot of fun, and it's all signed on board his ship, which I've done, and pictures of that too. But in the case of Ramos, I knew he was a scuba diver, okay, and that he liked the oceans. He actually liked the oceans.
Yeah.
And so I sent this perhaps foolish idea across to the president's office to say, why don't we sign it underwater? Okay.
Yeah.
And he agreed. Okay. And that scared the shit out of me because I'd learned scuba diving, but I wasn't very good at it at all.
Yeah.
So thank God I had some friends who'd take me out on Jakarta Bay, and they owned 3 islands, so they actually brought a master diver along and helped me. But the difference there compared to normal scuba diving was that I would stand on the back of the boat. They would literally dress me and lower me carefully into the water and follow me about 2 paces behind with the boat over the top. So I was certainly... Anyway, that's by the way. But I did have a bit of practice.
Yeah.
At this stage, the president's office came back and said, but this is now for CNN, for big international media. We want this... Because I had it on diveboard material, which is Phil's cap-sized page. Because I had divers working in my office, marine scientist. And they said, we wanted something big. Okay, so I commissioned UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, the main office in Manila, to make a big one. So 2 meters by 1 meter, big board, water and so on, okay. And we had a problem. Because when we got in the water, it was made on plastic and nothing would sign it. So we're sitting there with CNN beaming in, and nothing would sign this bloody large piece of plastic. Okay, until we borrowed the lipstick from the CNN reporter and did the thing in lipstick.
Lipstick worked.
Yes, lipstick worked. And so I guarantee this is the only international treaty signed underwater by a president in lipstick. Okay. I think I can stand fairly carefully with that one.
Oh, that's great.
But what then happened, and I really enjoyed Fidel Ramos, and I had lunch with him afterwards, of course. We had a chat about this. And he told me that where he's going to put it, and I assume it's there now in Batangas Bay, which is 110 kilometres north of Manila. He's got a Christian cross at 20 metres underwater, okay?
Okay.
And the reason he's got it there, he told me, he said, look, the reason is, this is a religious country, okay? The only day I have off is Sunday. And I've got to go to church.
Perfect.
So I built a cross down the bottom, and I can go diving, and so I'm in my personal chapel. So, and I haven't been down to look, but it's next to the Christian cross. At 20 metres underwater in Batangas Bay, the only international treaty signed in lipstick by a president to preserve the oceans.
Ah, that's wonderful.
So
what a great story.
There were some creative bits one could do in the job.
Yeah.
This became more fun.
Lipstick. Oh, cheers.
Cheers. Look, there's other things I was going to talk about if you want to, but it's up to you.
No, give us another one.
I've talked about. Sorry, this is not for broadcasting just yet. I'm just sort of
so definitely on your Kyoto. That's the geisha. That's still that's an ancient part of Japan, isn't it? And is that the geisha capital, Kyoto?
It's the most ancient capital. I wouldn't have. Well, maybe you're right.
Walking around.
Yeah, you do. Actually, you do. In
it's the Hokkaido Road.
Yes. Particularly, Storm might take me to some of the really interesting backstreet restaurants, which were fantastic.
I think if you're going, you got to go with a guide. Yeah. Speak Japanese. I've got a friend who goes over there quite semi-regularly. We're guitarists and stuff, and he's telling me about this guitar street in Tokyo. And you go into a guitar shop, and they don't have 50 guitars or 100. They got thousands, like rainbow-coloured, Les Pauls and stuff. It just sounds like bloody paradise to me.
A very different street I found in Taiwan. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Because particularly when I was working, Taiwan was not part of my mandate with the UN because it's not able to be a member. Okay?
Well, it's not officially a country unless we want to go apologising to some people.
But it was of APEC, and for whatever reason, because I'd worked a lot in Asia before, Australia made me their first chairman of APEC. Okay.
Oh no way! Really?
I was chairman of APEC.
Okay.
But responsible for, there were several chairmen responsible for a number of areas, and I was responsible for human resource and technical education, stuff like that, etc. Okay. Anyway, Taiwan and China were two of my members, and I was chairman of meetings between Taiwan and China, which required a lot of learning about diplomatic activity and how you actually handle this. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I went to Taiwan a few times as part of this, okay, and where they entertain you in the capital is Snake Street, particularly. And this street has got, every second building is a snake restaurant in Taipei.
Wow,
okay.
Really?
And every building in between is a karate studio.
Karate
is
Cobra Kai.
It's a very masculine area, I tell you. Okay, but the thing is then, and of course I went as the honoured guest, which can be a disadvantage, I can assure you.
Yeah.
Because again, that meant I had to eat first and before anyone else would touch their food. Okay, and this happened all the bloody time that I was in these jobs. Okay, and what happened there was that they, the way the snake is served is it comes in by itself across the floor. Okay, and the more poisonous the snake, they believe the best taste it is. So the more poisonous it is, you get this very, very poisonous snake coming in over the floor to you,
Oh, my God.
And the leader of this group then picks the snake up by the neck, cuts its head off, and pours the blood into your glass of brandy, which you must have immediately before anyone will touch anything else. Okay. And then they come back, of course, with the snake, in some kind of form.
Yeah.
But of course, no one will eat anything till I do. Okay.
Yeah.
Which was a little difficult number of times. But
Oh, Jesus.
I learned, no, Jesus wasn't there at all.
He wasn't
not,
there?
Not in Taiwan. He should have been. 'Cause
Flavour? Don't say it's like chicken.
I wouldn't. Flavour was not what I was concentrating on. It was survival.
I know there's a pub or a bar somewhere in Texas where they've got rattlesnakes in a whiskey barrel.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, and the poison slowly leaked out into the barrel and all that. So
Oh, well. Now, the restaurant I heard about, but I haven't been there in the United States, was one that particularly works with roadkill. Okay,
roadkill.
They roadkill. They only cook roadkill, and their motto
That is brilliant.
Their motto is from your grill to ours.
Wow.
That would attract me a lot.
Wow, that'd have to be a fresh kill, you think, especially in that hot sun, if it, you know,
Oh yeah,
I'm presuming.
absolutely.
Oh, my word.
Look, I was going to talk about crises and stuff like that and what goes on. I've talked about it a bit already, really.
I'm looking forward to your book coming out. Where can someone get a copy of that?
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon?
I saw it.
Oh, did you? Beautiful.
It's got a pre-order.
The new one,
Yeah.
the new one's there already.
Kyoto,
It might be the old one, the Kyoto
Post-
Manifesto. This is the post-COVID.
post-COVID.
Is it on?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Manifesto.
Oh no, just interested that it is, because I've got a copy of the pictures of, with the cover, because I did design it. That's
There
it.
we go.
Hey, that's it.
And Kyoto's a good place because we got the
Hey,
Kyoto.
wow, I didn't realise that was up. That's great. Hardcover, 12 June. 12 June, rubbish. Oh, they're a bit slower than I thought they were.
120 euros. Is that euros or pounds?
Pound.
Is that 120 quid? Oh my God. I'll be getting a soft card. No, I'm sure.
It's an elite market. Yeah, you can buy it electronically as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. But
But
Kyoto seems to be an interesting, because we had the original, that's where the original environmental protocol was signed, wasn't it? The Kyoto Agreement, which then everyone pulled out of, or Trumpy pulled out of, or something. Is it still going, the Kyoto?
I believe so. Trump pulled out, absolutely. I mean, Trump pulled out every bloody thing that mattered. But
He did. Yeah, he was into that. It's amazing he had kids at all.
it's still, I think the protocol is still supposed to be a
thing.
thing, yeah. But it's a framework within which, I mean, the amount of attention now being played particularly by the head of the UN to global warming is really serious. He says we have code red now.
Well, it's not looking good for 2050. If our kids, if we're going to be around our kids, it's looking pretty. But I think one of the issues that there's also there's still, you got the twin-headed snake, of global climate change. And then you've got nuclear war, which everyone seems to have dropped the ball on. And I remember growing up in the 80s and there was movies out and I was only like 5 years old, but I was petrified. And I grew up in New Zealand, but it was nukes were on our mind, and the idea that a politician anywhere in the world would come out and actually say they're going to use them, it was ridiculous. But I remember Trump, didn't he say he was going to use them once? And we're not, the human population isn't as primed against nukes as they were. I've seen some things on American media where they're trying to say, we'll just have a little nuclear strike. Sean Penn came out saying they should nuke Russia and Ukraine. Like, these people are insane. There's two big problems. The birth canal is getting a bit twisty, as it were.
Well, I mean, at least some of the Ukrainians are saying that the people from the Russians had stolen things from Chernobyl, and they're going to die because of it, because of their radiation.
Yeah,
But
it's
nuclear.
Whoops.
Hey, don't even go on about home ownership. We're going on about nukes. Oh my word!
So really?
Yeah, don't nuke my house.
Wow,
next
that's
door.
right. But there's another thing. The fallout from all this looks like house prices.
Fallout is
Down.
an appropriate expression for nuclear thing.
Well, that's right. But I am thinking, like when the planet's going to be all right. She's been struck by a moon-sized object 100 million years ago.
7 times, hasn't it?
7 times. She can handle
But
it.
please realise one of the consequences of that, which is critical, it wiped out the bloody dinosaurs within a year, okay?
Yeah.
That meant the little mammals, the tiny little fellas running around, who created us.
Yeah.
We would not have this conversation tonight unless that bloody
Unless
planet,
that
thing had
happened.
been destroyed. That asteroid had hit the Earth, X million years ago.
Yeah.
We wouldn't exist without that.
Well, so every rose has a thorn. Well, every thorn
Well,
has
yeah,
a rose. So, when we're talking about climate change and all these things, we're talking about human survival.
Yes.
And humans are we've done some good things. And hopefully we deserve to survive. I think if we do deserve to survive, we will. But how long for? Let's say even if we last for 1 million years, we won't be in this form anyway, will we? We'll be something
likely
else.
not.
Well, one of the things, I actually looked at, I did a lot of talks about, what happens in life and so on, which I give around to U3As particularly.
Yep.
But I gave a particular talk on impermanence, okay? It was very interesting.
Yeah, impermanence.
Because when I give talks now, okay, I run two streams at once.
Yep.
One is my talk, verbal one, and the other one is a visual one. No words, just visual images that say what I'm saying. In the same
You've got
time
a
in
screen
words.
up.
I've got a screen up.
You
and
click it.
and it's just going past while I talk. Okay?
Beautiful.
And it works really well.
Yeah.
But in this one, I was, I talk about impermanence because I wanted to really talk about what I called it was, a number of things. But living for life is what I basically said. And there's a few, and ultimately ended up talking about dying, death, okay?
Yep.
And there's some quite interesting things one learns about that when you actually go looking about death.
Yeah.
But-
there is. Yeah.
But
for sure.
more than anything else, the lesson is you die according to how you live.
Yeah.
If you live with pretense, you're going to have a bad time.
Yep.
If you live with care and so on, you will be okay. You can handle it. But the thing was that I gave the talk to, and I've given it to a couple of U3A groups, University of Third Age, so all the people are, 70s or whatever, but they're
okay.
getting closer to the end of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I was a bit worried at first talking about this, I thought, well, these guys might get scared, worried, that I'm talking about dying, But what happened in every case, two out of three, and then the others were similar, they said that's the best conversation we have ever had after a talk.
Yeah.
Because they never have time. They never are able to talk about dying, which is the thing staring you in the face in 5 years.
We can't talk about death in the West. It's something that happens over there and it goes in a casket. And it's awful how we can't talk about this major point in life.
Yes.
That's the big thing.
Well,
It's coming everywhere.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
You've got $1 billion all there to say it doesn't make any difference.
No.
You're still going to cop it.
And thank goodness for that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
the ones to go first.
Yeah, that's right. I did there's some really interesting studies out on a good death and studies done in hospices and how people have a good death or not. And one gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he's written a book on it, and he said I think he might have been a surgeon or something, seen a lot of people die, is letting things go. There's a story of Ishtar, the goddess, and she was following her fella down to hell anyway, and she goes to the first gate of hell, and they say you have to take off your earrings, which is your intellect. Then the second gate, and she had to take off the final gate was to take off her crown, which was to give up godhood itself. But basically, to get a good death, you have to give away your children, you have to give away everything. You're
non-attachment.
Non-attachment. And what is our capitalist?
It's about attachment.
It's all about attachment. You are your Amazon shares or whatever it might be.
Well, that's the kind of thing I'm more or less saying. I'm saying, look, we live in a world where we are, without question, impermanent. But the world is telling us we are permanent. It's telling us that if we buy this beauty product, our faces will look young again. We can be...
I can't stand it because... as a man, I find females attractive as a hetero man, but older females that have had work, it just doesn't work for me. But you get someone like, obviously Audrey Hepburn or something, but there is something to be said about aging. There's nothing fucking wrong with it. I'm quite happy because as I get older, I'm attracted to people my age. I think they're great. It's just not interesting.
I also use humour in this, okay? Dave Allen is a beautiful cycle, and there's two bits in this. The first one, and I'll come back to the longer story in a tick. He says he met this guy in his 30s who said, look, when I get 80, and I'm really losing it. I'm going to kill myself. I'm not going to just hang about, okay?
Yeah.
And he met this guy in his 80s, and he said, I know I've got to kill someone, but I can't remember who it is. but his story, which I really like, he says, okay, and eventually what I did with my pictures, I showed all of this in, cartoons, in a kind of a circle. When you're a teenager, you're not going to die. It doesn't even exist,
No.
Get to your 20s and think, well, if I can make it to 40, that'll be great,
Yeah,
and then you get to 40, you think, oh, Christ, no, I've got to get to 50. Get to 55, 56, we got 56, Get to 56, oh, no, I finally get through this. And you finally get there, and it's, you don't.
No, I've had a few heart issues and all that, and there's that balance. I'm never allowed to drink alcohol again. It's not that they said that.
Congratulations.
You do have to balance life,
of course.
And so you pick your battles. And now I don't drink unless I'm around. I won't drink at home by myself or anything like that. No way. I'm in good company.
That's why I invite people in like me to be with you.
That's absolutely right. We'll be doing a lot more podcasts.
I thought so.
You a lot.
Well, I like going out to drink, and that's the only way I do it too. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a perfect place to do it.
Yeah, and drink good things. It's a balancing act because no one gets out alive. So it's trying to be as.
But there's some interesting things about it. Like, for example, one of the really big issues is about getting sick and getting and whatever.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, absolutely.
And we're sort of used to trying to be caring for people who are ill and sort of looking after them, etc.
Yeah.
But infrequently do we actually get to the point of going deeply into what they are or what they really need. And there's, a phrase that's been developed quite recently called illness intelligence. Okay.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, in fact, you actually see the thing through the eyes of what really matters for that person in their life. And the example is a guy who just died in December last year in Katoomba, in Australia.
Okay.
And he was a professional musician who played saxophone. Okay.
Oh, wow.
But he got cancer and lost his right arm, so he couldn't play saxophone anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
But that was his life. So his muso friends and his wife got together, and they found a man in Belgium who made instruments for disabled people, and he made him a one-handed saxophone.
Oh, how fantastic.
And so this guy had a one-handed saxophone, and it took him a few months to learn it, but then he put on a big concert for his mates and everybody else around the place. And that got picked up in Britain by the people who were organising the Paralympics. First time they played a music band at the Paralympics in Rio, okay? And this band, they put him in it, it was the point, playing his one-handed saxophone.
Yeah.
But the guy who was playing bass guitar had a hook. The guy playing piano had stumps, for his hands.
Wow.
And this guy was playing a one-handed saxophone. So, it was amazing stuff. That then got picked up by other people, including Channel 4 in Britain. And they started recording in Abbey Road Studios, where the Beatles have been,
Yeah.
So the last few years of his life till he died were absolutely complete of his life, and completed his life even better in that sense. That is illness intelligence. Isn't it great as an idea to think in those terms?
Idea. Yeah, rather than the sadness and of course there's going to be sadness.
Tattoo on the head, sorry about that.
Yeah.
But it's saying, now what is it about your life that really matters to you, that we can maybe become involved in? I had a conversation a couple of nights ago. One of my side missions is, not mission, I'm not a Buddhist, but I believe absolutely in the values of care, compassion, mindfulness and trust and so on, okay? And for various reasons, I've become involved with Nantian Institute down here in Wollongong, the Buddhist place, okay?
Yeah.
Indeed, for reasons known only to them, I'm now the chairman of the advisory committee to this place on humanistic Buddhism research and stuff. Anyway, but there was somebody came out the other night that came up with a person who's dying or whatever, and they're trying to sort of involved in compassion. It's a grandfather. That's right. And he was, she is now a Buddhist, and she's trying to help him sort of to discover Buddhism so he can be okay when he dies and so on. But he lived a totally different life running. This is in China, I think, or one interest in Asia.
Yeah.
And he became involved in developing organizations and stuff. And what he needs is to be able to connect back to his life, what his life meant.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what he needs. Okay.
Yeah.
And she can only see it through the eyes of where she should go to be comfortable with living, dying, you know, as a Buddhist with the values that can accept that maybe you can go further on or whatever else it might represent. Now, to me, illness intelligence is to understand the life of the person and what matters in their life, and building from that, perhaps to a way that they can relax more easily within the context of the fact they're going to die, you know?
Yep.
But that's what, and I think this concept of illness intelligence in relation to life and dying and living and so on is really very important.
Well, we don't have a conversation about it, you know, like people get solace from religion, and which is fair enough if you're into that, but if you're not, there's no real conversation around it, is there? You know, like, and it's very uncomfortable for us in the West. Mostly, I think the Irish kind of do it a bit better, maybe. But
the Irish do a lot of things, interestingly.
That's all right.
Sorry, I'll digress totally again. The last time I went to Ireland, forgive me, this is not quite about religion. It's just about the Irish, and I'll come back to religion any second now. Yeah. But the thing was that I got to the airport, and this is while I was living in somewhere anyway. The point is, I had some friends in America, and they, that's right, they lived in Indonesia, but Panda was American, and they had a wedding for their kids in Ireland, okay, and they invited me to the wedding. Yeah, it was in the country in a castle, okay, but I had to stay in Dublin that night, okay, and so I got to the airport and I talked to the guy at the airport. I said, "Well, how do you get to this hotel?" And he said, "I tell you exactly how to get there. You go down this road here in front of you till you get to Murphy's pub. Then you turn left till you get to O'Shaughnessy's pub. And then 200 metres before you get the next pub, then you turn right again." You know, every bloody thing he said was about the hotel. Even when I hadn't got to, you know. Yeah. And then the other, I should not. This is a positive thing because I love Ireland and I love the people, really. But coming back into Dublin from the other direction, came across a roadworks thing, you know. Yeah. And they had a sign up saying, "Roadworks in progress, prepared to be delayed till June the 2nd. And this was April. Yeah. It felt a bit long to wait.
My brother got married over there, and in a place called Westport. We were driving from Dublin out to Westport, took a few hours, whatever. And then there's a traffic hold up just ahead of us. There's like 5 cars and people were stopped, and then people started doing U-turns, and it was all a bit weird. I'm like, I couldn't see anything up there. I'm like, what's going on here? And we got up there. Everyone had done U-turns by then, and it must have gone around miles out their way. And all it was is some kid had got a witch's hat and put it in the middle of the road on the lines. There was nothing else. We just drove past the witch's hat. Nothing happened.
But who knows what happened to your spirit?
Well, that's right.
Your inner consciousness.
The old Pooka might have got me.
Yeah, it could have been.
The old giant rabbit. Yeah. Well, I think this has been great. We've done a beautiful segue. We started with your previous death.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and now we've spoken about everyone else's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The full cycle, really.
The full cycle. Steve, thanks very much for coming on.
My pleasure.
It's been excellent. Thanks for the wonderful wine and the great stories.
Excellent.
And we'd love to have you on again once the book is out, everyone. If you're interested in economics.
That's the first time I've given an address. I didn't realize June was supposed to be out in a couple of weeks, but anyway, that's fine. That's interesting.
I might even try and get my ex-sister-in-law, the Irish lady, Sarah, on. She's an economics professor down there at MIT.
Okay.
So
that'd be interesting.
I'd like to have her take on it as well.
What is her approach to economics?
I think she's just classical economics, although I'm not going to take kudos for anything, but I did mention Bitcoin to her about 7 years ago, and now she's one of Australia's leading Bitcoin experts.
Is that right?
Yeah,
obviously influence.
Sarah King there. So, and she's there's another one of the possible tools to help us out of a situation. I think
Good.
I think the monetary situation is on rocky foundations. So if we can put it back on solid foundations, it'd be good.
Good one.
Stephen, that's great. Thank you very much.
Good to talk to you.
And we'll see you next time, guys.
Adam, good to talk to you too.
Oh,
You
yeah.
too, mate. I enjoyed
Cheers,
it.
mate.
You've been more in the side of creating these incredible images. I didn't know whether you bloody well got them.
Seriously. She doesn't make monkeys.
Yeah.
Well, she made 2 little monkeys, but you know.
Actually, the last book sold about 17,000, but
That's not bad.
that's not bad. But the way they sell a lot of these books, wow, that's expensive little buggers. A lot of but you can buy any chapter separately if you want electronically.
Is it on Audible?
Hmm?
Do you know if it's on Audible?
You got a good voice. You should read it.
Yeah. Audio book.
Audio book.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. Not yet, anyway.
I'll check it out.
Well, talk to your publishers, because if you don't want it, you can just come here and record it.
That'd be interesting. I'd be quite interested to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people, you're driving in that. It's just, and I actually find, I love reading. I've always got a book by me, but it's actually, it's quite nice just having it in your ears if you get the right aura.
I enjoy it.
And
I
think
like both. I like to read, but having an audio book in the car is great.
But one of the things I learned a long time ago, see, when I started whatever it might have been, when I was even in the business school, was how to speak publicly.
Yes,
which means you don't talk straight. You a lot of up and down and expression is absolutely critical in doing that.
it is. It keeps it interesting.
Yeah,
I've noticed with good public speakers, yourself would be included, but if you're talking to a large crowd, you've got to pretend you're looking at someone in particular. You've got to move your vision around, and it's a definite skill. Actually, I might have a gig for you. Actually, we'll talk off air. Anyway,
tell me a little bit more before we start on this.
yes. It's there's something coming up.
That's not a big explanation.
Well, I might as well tell you. Well, we're still here. Anyway, we've got Julian Assange's father, John Shipton.
Wow.
There's a documentary about his fight to get Julian some justice. It's called Ithaca. It's a good documentary. It's playing at the gala on Monday, and John will be here. We're trying to get him on the show, but we're going to there'll be a Q&A after the screening, and we kind of need someone to help out with the Q&A and someone that can talk to the public. And I think someone with your UNESCO background, talking about the media, if I can see the major problem in the world, I actually think it's media, which is communication between people. It's been completely distorted. And then we get one person who has just given the truth, no editorials, nothing like that. He hasn't put anything into it. He's just said, here's the truth, you make your own mind up. And look at him. Not rotting in a Libyan jail or in a Chinese jail. He's in an English jail.
A British jail.
A British jail. It's unbelievable.
Isn't
because
it?
I think for these people, yourself and myself included, definitely myself, might think we're on the outer of the West and we have a problem with the West. I love the West. I think, the human rights are great things, but it's under attack. And the people that are trying to save it, people like Jeremy Corbyn for me, or Julian Assange, they're in jail. It's like, hold up, they're the ones that should be out the front, mold grows in a dark room. Rats they can't stand the sunlight. We need to get sunlight out. How can we have a democracy and vote? This is from Assange. He goes, how can you vote for a party or a person when you don't know what they're doing?
Yes, exactly.
So he shows you what they're doing, and he gets thrown in jail, and he gets thrown under the bus by all the media.
Got a medal.
Absolutely, he should. And he didn't run off to Russia. He could have. I'm sure Putin would have taken him in, but then he would have been the stooge. He's not a stooge, But now I fear with the whole anti-Russia thing that's going on, that he's now tarred with that. For me, it seems, that the whole English legal profession has turned against him. He's not going to get a fair judgment there. He just cannot get it. I hate to say it, but I think he might have to go to the lion's den, man. Yeah. And I think in the States, they've got the First Amendment. There's a lot of good lawyers out there. He's actually got more kudos in the United States.
Is that right?
Yeah, than he does in England. Oh, far. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of people behind in the United States. Like John Shipton, if you see him when he went to the United States tour, he got on all the major platforms and that over there. So, there's a lot to talk about. Anyway, so if you feel up for it, maybe we could organise something for Monday.
Yeah, I just need a bit of briefing in advance about what we're going to be looking at, that's all.
Yeah, okay. No worries. Well, yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay. Beautiful. Well, Thanks, peeps. Thank you,
Matt.
Stephen.
My
It's
pleasure.
beautiful. Cheers.
Thanks, Adam, too.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh.